Hey guys, tonight we board a creaky, barnacle-draped pirate ship bobbing somewhere in the turquoise waters of the 18th century Caribbean. The sails groan overhead like sleepy ghosts, and the salty wind tastes like sweat, mildew, and faint regret. Beneath your boots, the planks moan, a sound you've learned not to take personally. You're not here to steal treasure or swash any buckles. No, you're here for something far more critical to pirate life than gold or glory. You're here for rum, buckets of the stuff sloshing around in barrels, soaked into the deck boards, and stitched into the very rhythm of pirate routine. The air smells like firewood and fermentation. A nearby sailor stumbles past humming something that might be a sea shanty or just the side effects of drinking before breakfast, and you, my sleepy little stowaway, have just discovered your rations. Salt pork, a biscuit hard enough to dent a musket, and, yes, a generous mug of rum. It winks at you in the lantern light like it knows it's the real reason you're here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I always love seeing where in the world you're drifting off. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lift the mug and give it a swirl. The pirates around you are rowdy but cheerful, laughing through gold-toothed grins, arguing about anchor chains, and inventing new uses for empty bottles. The ship rocks gently beneath you like an oversized hammock, and in this moment, you start to understand. Rum isn't just refreshment out here, it's philosophy. A floating lifestyle distilled and poured neat. Every morning begins the same. Someone wakes up in the rigging. Someone else has a parrot nesting in their hat, and someone always complains that the rum tastes a bit kelpier than usual. The cook, who has all the warmth of a crab in mid-molt, explains that this batch aged next to the pickled eel barrel. Adds character. He grunts. You sip anyway. The captain, black hat, red coat, and a beard thick enough to house a small ecosystem, steps onto the main deck and claps his hands. All right, you lot, barrels are low. We'll dock at Tortuga tomorrow, so ration it smart. A low moan of dismay rumbles across the crew like someone just banned fun. Aboard a pirate ship, rum isn't just a treat. It's currency, medicine, bribe, morale booster, toothpaste substitute, don't ask, and the closest thing they have to therapy. One sailor even swears his mother used to pour a bit in his porridge before school. Smartest lad in Port Royal, I was, he says, pointing to his wooden leg. You glance over the ship's logbook, which shockingly contains more math than poetry. There are notes on how many barrels remain, which crew members got extra rations for patching the sail, and a strange line that reads, Gibbs owes 2 mugs to Thomas, pending dice results. Even here, in the heart of so-called lawlessness, there's order. Pirates budget, not in spreadsheets and Excel formulas, but in ladles, mugs, and tightly sealed barrels. 1 barrel contains clean rum, debatably clean. Another's marked for medicinal use, which you suspect is just code for the captain's private stash. Then there's one painted red with a skull on it. You ask about it. No one answers. They just blink at you. Slowly as the sun dips and the ship turns to gold under twilight, the evening ritual begins. Crew members line up with tin cups and wooden ladles. The quartermaster, a man who looks like he's been carved from old rope, stands beside the barrel, pouring measured amounts. No overpouring, no sneaky refills, just disciplined distribution. You whisper to the sailor next to you, "Why so strict?" He shrugs. "We run out, people get stabby." Makes sense. You lean against a crate and listen as the night unfurls. A banjo twangs from somewhere near the crow's nest. A crewman named Billy recites terrible poetry to a rat he claims is his accountant. Two others argue about who can hold their breath longer in rum. One tries it. Immediate regret. Everyone applauds. Historians still argue whether pirates drank more than regular sailors, or whether their wild reputation just made every barrel seem more magical. Some scholars suggest pirate rum was weaker than expected, cut with seawater, lemon juice, or the tears of whoever lost at dice. Others argue pirates probably drank far less than movies claim. After all, falling off a ship mid-swig isn't very romantic. But here's what no one debates. Budgeting rum was essential. Too much, and you get chaos. Too little, and you get mutiny. It was a delicate, sloshing equilibriumed AT night. You lie in your hammock, swaying gently as the ship sighs. Below deck, someone's snoring like an out-of-tune accordion. You can still smell rum, sweet, sharp, a little smoky. It lingers in the wood, the air, even your thoughts. You let it carry you towards sleep, knowing this voyage is only beginning. Tomorrow, you'll learn how rum became actual pirate salary. But for now, close your eyes. You're safe. Probably. Just don't drink anything from that red barrel. Morning creeps across the sea like a lazy cat, the light sneaking in through the slats of the lower deck just enough to rouse you without fully inviting consciousness. You groan. The floor beneath your hammock is already sticky with a syrupy film left behind from last night's toasts, spills, and what one pirate proudly called a celebratory flail. You climb out, feet landing in something sloshy, and you try not to investigate. The ship smells of salt, mildew, smoke, and the faint tang of overripe bananas, which is an improvement. A few groggy sailors stumble past, nodding in acknowledgement. One is cradling a barrel like it's a baby. You think that might be his baby. You shuffle to the deck and glance toward the horizon. The island of Tortuga still sits low in the distance. Your pit stop for more supplies, more bar fights, and critically, more rum. The captain and quartermaster are already in discussion, heads bent over a stained ledger. Not maps, not naval strategy, just numbers and a long list of liquid assets. This is your first lesson in pirate economics. Rum is basically currency. On land, coin is king. Gold doubloons, silver reals, the occasional pearl. But at sea, where there's nothing to spend it on and no shopkeepers floating by, liquid luxury becomes more valuable than metal. Pirates drank their wealth, bartered with it, used it to pay off grudges and bribes, and occasionally tried to use it to water plants. That last one did not go well. You lean in close as the quartermaster marks a line on the barrel. 2 mugs a day, per man, he says, loud enough for the crew to hear. Bonus if you swab the deck or stitched a sail. Or if ye sing pretty, someone calls from the rigging. It earns a few chuckles and a flying boot. You squint at the list. It's an actual payroll system, just liquid. There's no vault, no treasure chest full of coins. The treasure is the rum. And if you spill it, well, let's just say the crew holds grudges. Some historians think pirates were ahead of their time. Instead of hoarding riches, they converted it into morale and immediate utility. What good's a gold bar on a wooden ship where it only makes your hammock tilt funny? But a barrel of good Caribbean rum? Now that's something you can spend, share, or slug. Take Jenkins, for example. A wiry man with a tattoo of a fork on his face. No explanation given. Jenkins is owed half a mug by Billy for losing a bet. Instead of demanding the drink immediately, he makes Billy write it down in a kind of drunken promissory note. It's not legally binding, but everyone nods solemnly when they see it. Last month, a sailor traded 2 mugs of rum for a hand-knit scarf that no one saw him wear. Another swapped his week's ration for an evening in the captain's hammock, which raised eyebrows, but was, apparently, extremely comfortable. You notice that the captain's share is the largest. Not unfairly so, but enough to keep him cheerful. His logic? If I've got the most to drink, I've got the most to lose if this ship sinks. That checks out. Historians still argue whether this practice made pirate ships more democratic than other vessels of the time. Some suggest that when everyone's pay came in the form of something you could spill, people became surprisingly cooperative. Others claim it created an undercurrent of tension, one wrong pour, and suddenly you've got knives drawn before breakfast. You sit down on a coil of rope and watch as a crew member tallies the rum-to-labor ratio for the week. This man, who looks like he once wrestled an octopus and lost, scratches calculations into a scrap of wood. 1 notch per mug, an X for debt, and a spiral if someone tried to bribe the parrot again. It's less accounting, more interpretive art. Still, it works. Nobody forgets who owes what. And those who do forget are usually reminded by the unmistakable sound of a tin cup being banged ominously near their bunk. You overhear another crew's tale. Once, 2 pirates tried to fake illness to get medicinal rum early. The ship's cook, who moonlights as a doctor thanks to a hat with feathers, made them eat raw eel as treatment. They got better. Possibly out of fear at dusk, the second daily rum ration is passed around. The mood on deck shifts with every pour. Laughter returns. Shoulders loosen. Someone starts humming a tune that's definitely out of key, and another joins in, completely out of time. But somehow, it's perfect, and you start to feel it. The strange warmth of a pirate economy built not on control, but on communal vice. They drink together, they argue together, and when supplies run low, they improvise or ration or just get real cranky. You glance at the barrel beside you and think of it less like a drink and more like a paycheck with very short-term returns. Liquid income, a sloshing salary. It may not last long, but then again, neither does a ship's good mood without it. That's how you learn the first real rule of pirate finance. Money talks, but rum sings. And if you can keep your ship full of both, you just might survive another sunset. The next morning, you wake up to the rhythmic thud of boots on deck and the creak of ropes being pulled tight. The sun hasn't even burned off the morning mist yet, and already the crew is buzzing. Not from rum, yet, but from anticipation. Because today, the ship reaches Tortuga, and that means it's time for supplies, repairs, and most importantly, dividing the booty. Now, don't get too excited. Booty, in this case, doesn't mean glittering gold or velvet-lined treasure chests. It can mean salted fish, cannonballs, bolts of cheap cloth, crates of half-rotten fruit, and, more than anything else, barrels of rum. You settle on a crate to watch as the captain unfurls a crumpled parchment from a waterproof pouch on his belt. It's the ship's articles, a kind of pirate constitution, and yes, you read that right. Pirates had governing documents. Some were signed by every crew member. Others were passed down from ship to ship, amended with stains, burn marks, and questionable doodles. And there, in nearly every version, are strict guidelines on how loot is divided, including the rum. The captain clears his throat. 1 full share to every able-bodied man. Half share to the cook, unless he makes that eel stew again. There's a round of nervous laughter. Extra shares to the gunner, the carpenter, and any man who kills a shark with his bare hands. Does wrestling count? Someone asks. The captain ignores him. Then he taps a line with his finger. Ration of spirits to be kept equal unless crew votes otherwise or situation dire. See, even in the so-called anarchic world of piracy, there were rules. If they captured a merchant ship and found a stash of high-proof rum, that loot didn't just disappear into the captain's cabin. It was tallied, measured, and distributed according to the code. Sometimes it was poured immediately into mugs. Sometimes it was stored for leaner days, labeled with chalk like a medieval inventory system. One barrel might say crew bonus, another in case of mutiny, and one suspiciously labeled medical emergency, do not touch. Almost always got touched. The concept of equal share applied broadly, but with nuance. You earned your portion based on risk and roll. Lost an eye in a skirmish? That's half a share extra. Got your finger bitten off by an angry parrot while boarding a schooner? That's more of a personal issue, but the crew might chip in if it was a really mean parrot. Historians still argue whether these pirate articles were consistently enforced or more of a symbolic gesture. Some claim that in the more notorious crews, the captain was more dictator than diplomat. Others believe the documents acted as real contracts, binding agreements that kept men from turning on each other over rum or silver. Back on deck, the quartermaster rolls out a chalkboard. Not a metaphorical one, an actual piece of painted wood with tally marks etched deep into it. He's the accountant of the sea, and today he's calculating how many barrels of rum each crew member is owed from their last 3 captures. You watch as he counts. 1 barrel from the Spanish brig, 2 partials from the sugar trader, and 3 questionable casks from that one French ship that smelled like dead marmots. No one knows what's in those yet, but they'll find out soon enough that a sailor beside you mutters, "Hope I get enough for a real shave in town." Maybe a new hat. His current hat looks like it's been used to catch cannonballs, that it's a strange moment. This pause between crime and celebration, between high-seas hijinks and bureaucratic bookkeeping. It's almost peaceful until the bickering starts. Why does he get an extra share? He just stood there waving his saber like a weather vane. I distracted the guard dog, didn't I? You fed it jerky. Still counts. And so it goes. Pirate HR is in full swing. The quartermaster silences them with a wave of his ledger. You want more rum? Do more next time. Or stop spilling it during boarding. That last jab is clearly aimed at a sailor named Rags, who is legendary for tripping, falling, and pouring an entire bottle of rum into the sea while trying to yell surrender. The fish below had a great night. Eventually, the dust settles and the barrels are rolled out. One by one, men collect their shares. Some hoist them onto their shoulders with pride. Others trade a portion on the spot for dry boots, exotic spices, or a particularly shiny spoon. You marvel at how structured it all is. Not random, not wild, just methodical. These pirates may be criminals, but they're disciplined ones. At least when it comes to their "Are you aimed at as the sun rises higher?" You catch a glimpse of the captain sitting cross-legged near the bow, sipping his share straight from the ladle. He looks content, a man who understands that even chaos needs a budget. You lie back against the crate and close your eyes for a moment. The scent of warm wood and molasses wafts past. Somewhere, a fiddle starts up, slow and soft. The crew's laughter floats over the deck like gulls. Dividing treasure isn't all about gold. Sometimes, it's about making sure everyone gets their due, one mug at a time. Later that day, you find yourself wedged into the narrow corridor that leads below deck, watching one of the most surprisingly serious events on any pirate ship, the quartermaster at work. Now, if the captain is the flashy one, the feathered hat, the booming voice, the dramatic hand gestures, the quartermaster is the quiet spine of the ship. He's the one with the ledger, the lockbox, and a memory so sharp he once recited an entire 3-week bar tab from memory, alphabetically. Pirates might fear the captain, but they respect the quartermaster. mostly because he's the one who hands out the rum. Today, the barrels from Tortuga have been loaded. They're fresh from the dock, some marked with paint, some sealed with wax, and at least one smelling faintly of bananas and regret. You peer at the closest cask. Burned into the wood are the words, "Old Reef Special, very strong." Someone has scribbled, under that in chalk, the quartermaster, a broad-shouldered man with a beard like steel wool and eyebrows in permanent disapproval, begins his ritual. He doesn't shout. He doesn't smile. He just measures, marks, and mumbles numbers that might as well be ancient spells. Every pirate lines up, cups in hand. No one dares skip the line or pour their own. That would be stealing from the ship, and on a pirate vessel, that's almost as bad as singing off-key during a sea shanty. You finally get close enough to see the system. A precise ladle, made from pewter and probably older than half the crew, dips into the barrel. 1 scoop per man, 2 if you've earned a bonus, and none if you're on punishment duty, which, judging by the number of grumbling pirates in the corner, happens frequently. This isn't a casual sloshing. The quartermaster stares at the ladle with the intensity of a man defusing a bomb. Any spillage is wiped. Any short pour is topped up. Every pirate receives exactly what the logbook says they should. 1 sailor tries to charm his way into a second scoop. "Come on, mate, it's my name day." The quartermaster doesn't blink. "You were born on Tuesday 3 weeks ago." "Nice try." The sailor shuffles away, defeated but somehow still impressed. Historians still argue whether quartermasters had as much power as records suggest. Some claim they were second in command, enforcing discipline and fairness even over the captain. Others think it varied from crew to crew. Some quartermasters were glorified inventory clerks, while others ran the ship behind the scenes like an unamused babysitter. This one, you're guessing he's the second type. You watch him assign rum rations to various barrels. 1 for daily drink, 1 for bartering, 1 labeled medicinal use only in quotation marks, and a smaller one marked with a skull and the word private. When asked, he growls, "Don't touch it unless your life's on fire." So, naturally, 3 pirates plan to touch it by sundown. There's even a column in his log for rum lost to spoilage or accidents. The most recent entry just says, "Barrel number 3, lost overboard." Jenkins was dancing. Again, you ask how often this happens. The quartermaster shrugs. "Rum's easy to spill. Men are easier." He doesn't elaborate. When he's not rationing, the quartermaster oversees the inventory: ropes, nails, weapons, soap, when available, and even morale. That last one isn't listed explicitly, but you can tell it's part of his job. He watches for tension. He knows who hasn't smiled in a week, who's hoarding their rum, who traded theirs away for mysterious reasons. Earlier, a pirate gave up his entire ration in exchange for a book of poetry. The quartermaster made a note, not just of the trade, but of the mood. He's not just managing supplies. He's balancing tempers. And the trickiest part? Keeping the rum flowing without letting it become a problem. It's a thin line. Too much, and you've got fights, fires, and someone trying to marry the anchor. Too little, and morale plummets faster than a cannonball. 1 particularly rough week. The ship had to go dry for 3 days after a storm ruined their stores. The quartermaster survived only because he locked himself in the storage room and passed out crackers through a knothole. When he finally emerged, he was applauded like a hero or a survivor of a very mild siege. You ask him if he ever drinks. He grunts, only when the math stops making sense. You're not sure if that's a joke, a threat, or just pirate code for mind your business. Still, there's a strange comfort in his precision. On a ship filled with chaos, storms, sword fights, and unsolicited accordion solos, The Quartermaster is stability. He's the calm in the center of the grog-soaked storm that as the day ends. He sits quietly near the barrels, checking his notes, adjusting the tallies. The sea rolls beneath the ship like a lazy lullaby. Lanterns sway. The crew is quiet, sipping their shares and watching the stars emerge one by one. You settle into a coil of rope and let your eyes close. Somewhere nearby, someone is softly humming. The scent of salt and rum wraps around you like a warm blanket. And the last thing you hear before sleep is the quiet scratching of a quill as the Quartermaster balances the books and, in his own way, keeps this floating madhouse from sinking. The next day greets you not with cannon fire or sirens, but with the gentle, wheezy cough of someone attempting to chew salted pork and still whistle at the same time. It's oddly relaxing. You sit up, stretch, and immediately wish you hadn't. The ship's cook has apparently decided to boil something that smells like old socks and vinegar. As you crawl up to the deck, a breeze hits your face, cleaner, crisper than usual. You think maybe the cook's culinary experiment scared the air away. Either way, the sky is clear and the sea sparkles like a spilled jewelry box. A good day to be alive, which is saying something out here. Breakfast is already underway. A ladle of stewed beans, a chunk of bread hard enough to be considered a weapon, and, of course, a modest mug of rum. Now, you'd think pirates just chugged this stuff all day long like medieval frat boys. But the reality is a little, sure. Because by the 18th century, pirates had started relying on rum as a supplement plan, especially when their nutrition involved foods that could double as doorstops. Today, you're learning how pirates didn't just drink rum for fun. They drank it to survive the absolute culinary horror that was life at sea. The food? Let's just say Michelin stars were in short supply. Imagine waking up every morning to hardtack, a type of biscuit that could shatter your teeth if you weren't careful. Pirates would tap it on the table to shake out any weevils. Yes, bugs. The weevils would drop out. And that was the clean part. There was salted beef, which came in slabs so tough it had to be boiled for hours to be chewable. And even then, it sometimes still wasn't. Sailors used their knives like chisels. Stews were mystery meat affairs with a 1 in 3 chance of being edible, and fruit was a luxury that rotted before the ship left the harbor. Enter. Rum.it wasn't just for drinking. It was the flavor mask, the morale booster, the thing that helped you forget that your dinner was vaguely green and possibly used as bait last week, that a spoonful of rum added to the stew could disguise almost anything. A splash over spoiled bread could soften the taste. Mixed with lime juice, if they had any, it became a cure for boredom and, allegedly, scurvy. Though, historians still argue whether rum actually helped with scurvy or if that's just pirate optimism wearing a lab coat. One pirate once tried soaking his entire meal in rum, calling it predigestion. He vomited for 3 hours. The crew applauded. The British Navy, bless their orderly, overly uniformed hearts, had its own version of this rum plan. Sailors were given a daily ration called Todd, a specific amount of diluted rum served like clockwork. The drink was often mixed with water and citrus and dubbed grog, which made it slightly less effective at causing drunken brawls. Slightly. Pirates, of course, weren't that precise. Their version of grog might include sea water, leftover stew juice, or whatever was left in a barrel that day. They weren't picky, but they were pragmatic. One fringe theory suggests pirates occasionally used rum to clean wounds. That sounds logical until you remember the same barrels were also used to store pickles, cannon wicks, and once, very briefly, a ferret. Still, the routine mattered. When the food was bad, and it was always bad, rum offered structure. A known quantity in a sea of mystery meat. The ship's cook, who has just tripped and spilled a ladle of what may have been onion porridge on his own foot, isn't offended when someone skips the meal and sips their rum instead. Better nutrition that way, he shrugs. You sit near a group of sailors trying to invent new dishes with the week's meager ingredients. One mixes hardtack, beans, and rum and calls it pirate parfait. Another grates dried fish over salted cabbage and dubs it seaside crunch. Everyone laughs until they realize it's all they've got. Food scarcity wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous. Without proper nutrients, pirates fell ill fast. Scurvy, dysentery, and something politely called the runs were frequent guests aboard. So, while rum didn't technically fix anything, it numbed the pain, lifted the mood, and sometimes killed off whatever was lurking in the stew. One pirate tells you, dead serious, that he once boiled his boots and drank the broth with rum. Best meal I had all month, he says. You can't tell if he's joking. Another pipes up, I once ate the same biscuit for 12 days. You mean it lasted 12 days? No, I just couldn't finish it. As the crew chuckles, you realize rum isn't just about escaping reality. It is reality. It connects meals, rituals, rest hours, and arguments. It adds flavor to a life otherwise full of sameness, salt, and splinters. That night, dinner is more of the same. Bean stew, ship's biscuit, and rum to soften both. The crew gathers in loose clumps, some humming songs, others telling the same story for the 5th time. You sit with your back to a mast, the stars peeking out above. The sea whispers around the hull like a lullaby. You sip your rum and feel it settle in your stomach like a small, warm fire. It doesn't make the food better, but it makes you better at tolerating the food. And sometimes that's enough. By now, you're getting into the rhythm of pirate life. Wake up, dodge breakfast, sip rum, avoid falling overboard. Repeat. You've even learned the unspoken rule that whoever sings before noon has to swab the deck in their underpants. A rule established, you suspect, solely because of Jenkins. Today, though, you're noticing something different. A nearby ship looms on the horizon, not a pirate vessel, but a naval one. The Union Jack flaps crisply in the wind, and everything about it, from the bright uniforms to the neatly coiled ropes, screams discipline, the complete opposite of your ship's charming disarray. The captain squints toward it and spits overboard. Royal Navy, he mutters. Poor devils. They get rum too, but they've got to earn it with silence. It's true. While pirates may have treated rum like their constitutional right, the Royal Navy ran on a stricter, more measured version of the same habit. Their daily ration, known as the tot, was standardized and scheduled. 1/8 of a pint of rum, twice a day, diluted with water to make grog. And if you think the name sounds unappetizing, just wait till you smell it. Imagine sweaty molasses mixed with pond water and regret. But for sailors in the Navy, grog wasn't a luxury. It was an expectation, and it served a purpose beyond mere refreshment. Rum kept morale up. It helped cover the taste of brackish water that had been sitting in barrels for months. It acted as a mild disinfectant and, let's be honest, it took the edge off a life that involved climbing rigging during storms while your underpants froze to your thighs. You watched through a spyglass as sailors aboard the naval ship line up with tin cups. A bosun, stern and steady, pours measured ladles with all the joy of a man counting grains of rice. There's no banter, no cheers, just routine. Your crew, meanwhile, is hosting an improvised limerick contest about rum and goat-related incidents. One verse ends with, "And that's why we don't dock in Martinique." Everyone laughs, though you suspect there's a very real story behind it. The difference between the two ships is striking. One runs on order, hierarchy, and punishment. The other runs on consensus, chaos, and slightly looser pants. Historians still argue which system was more effective. Some praise the Navy's consistency, its ability to maintain discipline, keep sailors alive, and sail through bureaucratic nightmares without sinking from boredom. Others point out that pirates, while less structured, had higher crew morale, better loot distribution, and far fewer cases of death by flogging for not saluting properly. In fact, many pirates were former Navy sailors who jumped ship, literally, when the chance came. Why? Because on a pirate ship, they could vote, speak up, and drink their rum without being called insubordinate. You sidle up to a veteran pirate named Sawyer, who claims he once served on a British frigate. "Used to get my tot at the crack of noon," he says, gazing at the other ship. "Then spend the rest of the day dodging cannonballs and the captain's temper. Here, I get grog and grog-based decisions." You blink. What's a grog-based decision? He grins. Any idea that sounds better after the second cup. Fair enough. As the naval ship drifts out of sight, your crew returns to their favorite debate: who invented rum first? One insists it was the Portuguese. Another swears it was the Barbadians. A third says it was his grandmother, who made it from figs and pure spite. It's not just a drink. It's a point of pride. One pirate explains how, back in the Navy, you could actually get your tot withheld as punishment. Miss it shore? No rum. Talk back? No rum. Steal someone else's rum? No teeth. Pirates, by contrast, only withheld rum in extreme cases, like mutiny, theft, or playing the hurdy-gurdy without permission. There's something telling in that. On Navy ships, control came from deprivation. On pirate ships, control came from shared consequence. You drank as a crew, laughed as a crew, and if someone knocked over the rum barrel, well, you really had to run fast. You recall the case of Two-Thumb Tim, who once spilled a full jug during a storm and had to swab the deck in silence for a week. The silence was the hard part. The comparison continues into meals. Naval ships followed strict rationing tables, down to the last ounce of dried peas. Pirates? They ate whatever they could catch, steal, or ferment. But when it came to rum, both ships understood. Morale depends on that golden liquid. Later that evening, your crew gathers for the evening pour. The sun dips low, casting everything in bronze. Someone lights a lantern. The quartermaster hands out mugs, and someone raises theirs in a toast. To discipline we don't have and don't miss. You sip. The rum burns, but it soothes too. In the distance, the Navy ship is just a speck now, all tidiness and protocol. Here, on this creaky vessel that smells like fish and freedom, you lean back against the railing and feel lucky. You don't need brass buttons or a captain who yells for fun. You just need the sea, the stars, and a little something strong to remind you that you're still standing. By now, you've adjusted to the rolling sway of the ship beneath your boots and the sweet, sharp tang of rum that seeps into nearly every wooden plank on board. The sun rises reluctantly, casting a hazy glow across the deck, where someone, probably Buttons, has passed out halfway into a sea shanty. You kick his boot gently. He snorts, mutters something about taxes on pineapples, and goes right back to snoring. Today's lesson? The fine art of buying rum. You'd think pirates would just steal everything, and honestly, yes, that is plan A. But even pirates needed to do some old-fashioned shopping once in a while, especially for essentials like gunpowder, cannonballs, and, yes, barrels and barrels of rum. And here's the kicker. Pirates were surprisingly strategic when it came to where, when, and how they bought their booze. You lean on a crate and listen as old Calico tells you about the island of St. Kitts. Best prices in the Caribbean, he says, scratching his beard. Low tariffs, friendly merchants. And they didn't ask too many questions, if you catch my drift. You nod, even though you're still working out what exactly a drift is in this context. Back in the early 18th century, the Caribbean was basically a floating buffet of sugarcane plantations, molasses distilleries, and shady taverns that smelled like despair and pickled oranges. Rum wasn't just a drink, it was a booming commodity. Every pirate port had its own pricing quirks and customs. In Nassau, for example, you might trade looted silk or Spanish coins for 3 barrels and a nod of respect. In Tortuga, it was more barter-based, 1 cutlass, 1 goat, or a favor owed to a man with fewer teeth than fingers. Port Royal? Let's just say, if you couldn't afford rum, you could always bet on a crab race and hope for the best. Pirates didn't deal in legal currency as much as they dealt in loot. The quartermaster, effectively the CFO of the ship, would oversee all transactions. He was part accountant, part negotiator, and part human lie detector. If he said the price was too high, no rum was bought. If he said the barrels were watered down, the vendor might find their inventory set on fire by morning. But here's a fun wrinkle. Not all rum was created equal. You thought rum was just rum? Oh, sweet summer child. There was Kill Devil rum. Cheap, harsh, and named for what it did to your insides. Then there was the good stuff, aged in charred barrels, smooth enough to sip without crying. Some barrels were spiced with cinnamon, cloves, or even crushed insects, accidentally, mostly. And a rare few came from private stills run by exiled monks or board plantation owners who'd rather distill sugar than manage crops. Pirates developed preferences. Some demanded Barbadian rum. Others swore by the Jamaican blend. A few stubborn sorts insisted on rum from Réunion Island, mainly because the name sounded fancy. And then, of course, there were the fake sellers. Oh yes, the con men. Picture this. You arrive at a cove to meet a local supplier. He's got 2 barrels, a toothless grin, and a parrot that says buy now, cry later. You roll back the lid and see golden liquid inside. You taste it. It tastes like something between varnish and regret. Surprise. It's just river water with molasses, wood ash, and maybe a bit of actual rum to throw you off. Pirates weren't fools. Some ships developed tests. One crew used copper coins. If the rum cleaned them, it was strong enough. Another used the lantern test, set it on fire. If it didn't light, it wasn't worth buying. Historians still argue whether pirates had formal standards for rum quality or whether it was mostly left to the quartermaster's tongue and judgment. Some claim there were ledgers. Others say pirates operated entirely by taste and bravado. What we do know is that purchasing rum was more than a task. It was a performance. You arrive in port, you swagger off the gangplank, you negotiate in 5 different languages and 4 kinds of hand gestures. You trade silver, goods, gossip, or promises. And if the deal goes well, you walk back to the ship with a barrel hoisted on your shoulder like a hero. If it goes poorly, well, remember the man who tried to sell watered-down grog. They're still finding bits of him in the harbor. As the day warms up, your captain calls everyone together. We're low on provisions. Time to make port. There's a murmur of excitement. Everyone knows what that means. Supplies, rest, rum. But first, shopping strategy. The quartermaster sketches a rough budget on a piece of driftwood. Half goes to food and water, a quarter to gunpowder. The rest? Rum and bribery. Possibly both at one point. One crewmate offers to charm the vendor. He's missing 2 front teeth, but insists his smile still gets results. Another plans to sneak behind the stalls and do a little discount adjustment. You're assigned to carry the empty barrels and look menacing. You accept the role with dignity and mild confusion. That evening, you dock at a small harbor tucked between jagged rocks and banana trees. Lanterns flicker from distant shacks, and the air smells of fried fish and sugar. You trudge with your crew through the muddy street to a wooden shack labeled Drinks and Things. The vendor eyes you all with practiced weariness. "No fights this time," he says. "No promises," your captain replies. The negotiations are short, theatrical, and slightly threatening. In the end, you walk away with 3 barrels, 1 bonus bottle for good behavior, and a stray cat that just wouldn't leave the ship. You roll the barrels aboard as the crew cheers. The deal was fair. The rum? Not the best, but certainly not the worst. And best of all, no one had to trade a tow this time. As the anchor rises and the ship drifts back into open water. Mugs are filled, toasts are shouted, and the stars blink overhead like they approve of this ridiculous floating marketplace you call home. You wake to the sound of laughter and the faint slosh of waves kissing the hull. The deck smells like spilled rum, roasted fish, and something else, possibly a sock fermenting under the stairs. You stretch, crack your back, and stumble toward the railing as the sun peaks over the horizon. The sea is calm, but your stomach, not so much. No one warns you about pirate hangovers, but there's no time for self-pity. Because today, you learn something that makes all those rum-soaked nights worth it. Pirates didn't just buy rum. They traded it, hoarded it, and sometimes weaponized it. That's right. Rum wasn't just a beverage. It was a bartering chip, a mobile currency, a diplomatic tool, and, occasionally, a bribe so good it could buy you safe passage through enemy waters, or at least a delayed cannonball to the face. Picture this. Your ship docks near a Spanish fort. You've got a hold full of stolen sugar, 1 busted cannon, and a captain with a suspicious rash. Your odds of walking away unscathed? Slim. Unless you happen to have 2 barrels of aged Jamaican rum and a quartermaster who knows how to smile with his eyes and lie with his mouth. The Spanish soldiers wave you in, share a drink, and accidentally forget to check your cargo. Historians still argue whether pirates intentionally used rum as political currency or whether it just happened to be what everyone wanted at the time. Either way, rum opened doors, settled disputes, and bought loyalties faster than any flag or treaty. It even worked among rivals. Imagine you're low on food and spot another pirate ship on the horizon. You both raise your flags, white skulls on black, very original, and prepare to fire. But instead of bloodshed, your captain offers a trade, a barrel of rum for dried beef and cannonballs. The other crew hesitates, then agrees. No one dies, and everyone gets to drink. A miracle? Maybe. Or maybe just proof that humans, no matter how salty or sunburned, will do almost anything for a good drink. Rum was also a peace offering within the crew. Tensions rise at sea. Someone cheats at dice. Someone else insults a man's mustache. Voices rise, fists clench, and suddenly the quartermaster's there with a bottle and a grin. A few mugs later, the feud fizzles out, and the mustache is once again universally admired. This wasn't just about keeping people happy. It was practical conflict management. Happy pirates don't mutiny. Drunk pirates might, sure, but at least they do it slower. One legendary pirate, Charles Vane, was rumored to keep an entire storeroom just for his bargaining rum. Some say it was a lie to make him sound diplomatic. Others claim it was true, and that he once talked a British merchant out of a fight by offering him a drink and singing a lullaby. Historians remain divided. Now, don't confuse this with generosity. Pirates didn't give rum away for free. There were strings attached. You wanted extra time in port? You shared your stash. You wanted to avoid deck duty? Offer a sip to the bosun. You wanted the captain to overlook the fact that you lost the compass while juggling? Best pour him a double. You pass a group of crewmates huddled near the helm. They're debating the best way to smuggle a barrel past customs. One suggests carving a false bottom. Another votes for bribery. A third shrugs and says, just hide it under Buttons. Everyone nods. Buttons hasn't moved since last night. He's technically considered cargo now. There's a strange camaraderie in these transactions. A quiet understanding. You don't steal another man's rum, unless you want to wake up with your hammock tied to the mast. But sharing it? That earns you loyalty. Maybe even a tattoo. And just when you think you've seen it all, you meet someone who takes it even further. Captain Adira, the sharp-eyed woman who commands the Midnight Scowl, doesn't trade gold. She trades flavored rum. Her ship is loaded with pineapple-spiced barrels, vanilla-infused batches, and one terrifying concoction known only as Firestorm. It smells like cinnamon and poor decisions. Other pirates line up at port just to get a taste. Some trade weapons. Others offer intel. A few just stand around hoping to inhale the fumes and get slightly tipsy. And she never drinks the stuff herself. Rum is for deals, she says. Water is for winning. Smart woman. By late afternoon, the crew has gathered below deck for a round of deal or drink. It's part card game, part bartering practice, and part excuse to yell at each other over rules no one remembers. You lose your boots, but gain a suspiciously sealed bottle labeled "Do not open at sea." You open it anyway. Inside is a pickle that you're not sure what lesson you've learned, but it feels important. That night, the stars shimmer above you as the ship rocks gently beneath your hammock. Somewhere on deck, someone's laughing. Probably Buttons. Probably still drunk. You think back to that barrel of rum that convinced a rival crew not to slit your throats. You remember the time your own captain used a bottle to settle a vote. And you marvel at how, somehow, this strange, sweet liquid became more than just a drink. It became a pirate's passport. Not just a way to unwind after battle, but a tool for survival. And as the wind picks up, rustling the sails like a lullaby made of canvas, you understand the quiet genius behind it all that a sword can threaten. A cannon can destroy, but a well-timed bottle of rum, that can change everything. You wake with the realization that your hammock is swaying slightly faster than usual, which probably means two things. One, the wind's picking up, and two, the helmsman is hungover again. You groggily make your way up to the deck, squinting at the sun, trying to remember if today is the day you were supposed to be on powder keg duty or sea biscuit counting patrol. Neither sounds appealing, but as you pass the quartermaster's table, covered in maps, ration slips, and what looks like a melted candle in the shape of a walrus, you spot something far more intriguing. A stack of tiny, square-cut parchment notes tied with twine. Budget slips. Yes, budget slips. Because while pirates lived like outlaws, they still had to balance the books. You can't raid and plunder effectively if you don't know how much you're spending on gunpowder versus how much you're losing to grog-soaked dice games. That's right. Pirates kept records. Or rather, some pirates did. Mostly the organized ones, or the ones who realized that their ship's future depended on not accidentally spending the entire loot haul on parrots and fancy belts. You lean in to take a closer look. One slip reads, 2 barrels black powder, 14 pieces .6 pounds salted beef, 3 pieces, replacement hook, left-handed, 1 piece. Practical stuff. But then you see another note, rum, spiced, barrel-aged, 5 pieces, decorative eye patch, blue velvet. 2 pieces, loaned to Pickle Sam for chicken investment, 3 pieces. You pause. Wait, chickens? Yes, chickens. and not even for eating. Sam's trying to start a breeding program. He calls it Cluck Gold. Historians still argue whether early pirate economies ever truly supported livestock entrepreneurship. No one agrees. But the dream lives on. The truth is, pirate budgeting was a blend of the meticulous and the ridiculous. While some captains, like the legendary Bartholomew Roberts, were sticklers for detail and demanded written logs of every musket ball, others were looser. Blackbeard, for instance, was more likely to scream, "Buy more rum," and throw gold coins into the ocean just to confuse enemy ships. Still, most crews developed a division of funds. A portion of any treasure haul was set aside for ship maintenance. Another part went towards supplies, food, drink, rope, so much rope, canvas, and weaponry. Then came wages. And yes, pirates had wages, unlike Navy sailors, who were often paid late. If at all, pirates had a more direct compensation system. After a successful raid, the loot was counted, valued, and split up according to a strict share system. The captain usually received 2 shares. The quartermaster received 1.5. The rest of the crew each got a single share, unless you were the surgeon, who often received more. Because, let's face it, someone needs to sew you back together after a cannonball mishap. And speaking of surgeons, they weren't cheap. You recall a tale from a nearby ship where a crew paid a French surgeon double his asking price to stay on board. He accepted, only to use all their wine as antiseptic. They almost threw him overboard, until he fixed a gunner's hand using a fork, a splinter of wood, and 3 threads from a captain's coat. The gunner went on to invent something called the left-handed toast grip. Completely unrelated, but he swore it improved drinking posture. The point is, pirates budgeted for people, too. Specialists like blacksmiths, carpenters, and navigators were worth every coin. Lose your navigator, and suddenly you're circling the Canary Islands for a month, convinced you're near Madagascar. Yes, that happened out of course. Not all budgeting was done in writing. Many pirates used memory and oral tracking. The quartermaster would loudly announce who owed what, and debts were enforced by shame, duels, or chore duty. You once saw a man assigned to rat wrangling for a week because he borrowed too many salted lemons without asking. Then there was the group fund, a common chest or locked barrel that held emergency savings. You know, for dry dock repairs, bribes, or purchasing a new rowboat when someone accidentally sets fire to the old one during a drunken fishing experiment. The chest was typically guarded or hidden in plain sight. Some crews painted it to look like part of the floor. Others hid it behind a false wall. And one notorious crew on the Lady Sorrow disguised theirs as a footstool. No one ever opened it because it smelled like feet. Genius. You remember the ship's last budget council, a thrilling event where 10 men yelled over each other about whether it was more important to replace the rear sails or to invest in a crate of honey cakes. The captain eventually decided to split the cost and buy half a sail and half a crate. The half sail didn't help much, but the cakes were gone in minutes. Historians still argue whether these councils were democratic marvels or just excuses to drink under the guise of fiscal responsibility. One journal describes them as unruly, entertaining, and occasionally productive. Later that night, you find the carpenter arguing with the cook about inventory shrinkage. The cook insists the crew ate all the biscuits. The carpenter insists that rats don't usually organize them into a spiral and leave them under hammocks. You silently agree with the carpenter, but decide not to get involved as you drift off in your hammock. You think about the parchment notes, the budget chest, and the fact that someone actually tracked how many spoons went missing each month. It's oddly comforting. In a world of chaos, cannonballs, and sea monsters made entirely of gossip, pirates still found a way to keep the books. They may have lived wild, unpredictable lives, but even outlaws know the value of a balanced ledger, especially when rum is on the line. You wake up not because of the sun or the sound of gulls, or even the creaking of the mast overhead. No, it's the quiet that rouses you. Unnatural quiet. The kind of stillness that says something's wrong, or worse, something's about to happen. Then, from the upper deck, a sneeze. Loud, dramatic, and unmistakably the result of someone trying to clean gunpowder barrels without a bandana. You exhale. So, not a mutiny, just morning chores. You roll out of the hammock, stretch, and head topside to find the crew hard at work, swabbing, repairing torn rigging, checking water barrels. But one group huddled near the mainmast catches your eye. They're flipping coins, not for fun, for accounting. This, you realize, is how pirates adjust their personal rum budgets. Pirates didn't just rely on the ship's overall treasure split. No, every individual had their own way of managing their cut. Some stashed it in secret pouches. Others kept detailed carvings on driftwood tablets. And then there were the coin flippers, a method equal parts budgeting, luck, and mild self-deception. Heads meant spend. Tails meant save. 2 heads in a row. Double rum. 3 tails. Buy rope. Somehow, it worked for them. Historians still argue whether this was superstition, strategy, or just boredom. But the practice appears in more than a few sailor journals. You sit down beside a weathered crewmate. Old Finn, missing 3 fingers but still unbeatable at cards. And he explains his method. See, he says, flicking a tarnished doubloon into the air. I splits me coinage. 1 pile fair pleasure, 1 fair need and stuff, and 1 I bury behind me bedroll, so drunk me don't find it. You nod. Surprisingly practical. This kind of micro-budgeting was common. Pirates, having no banks and limited patience for IOUs, developed personal systems for saving. Some used knotted strings, each knot representing a portion of their earnings. Others carved notches into the beams of the ship, hoping no one else figured out the code. You once knew a pirate who shaved tally marks into his beard. Genius, until someone accidentally trimmed him in his sleep. He wept over 20 lost pieces of 8 at the biggest dilemma, whether to spend immediately or save for the next port. Life at sea was uncertain. Storms, disease, cannonballs, and the occasional kraken made long-term planning a gamble. So many pirates leaned into what might be called aggressive present-tense economics. If you might not make it to next Thursday, why not buy that extra bottle of rum? Or that unnecessarily shiny pistol? But then there were the planners that a quiet crewman named Elias kept a full leather ledger. Every ration, every bet won or lost, every slice of orange he traded, documented in perfect ink. The crew mocked him until they realized he never ran out of tobacco and always had coin for shore leave. When the ship docked in Port Royal, most pirates poured into taverns, gambling dens, and massage parlors featuring surprisingly muscular parrots. Elias, meanwhile, bought property. A shack, but still real estate. Rumor has it he retired early, started a bakery, and called it Ye Old Dough. Historians still argue whether Elias was a pirate at all by the end. Another strategy involved group pooling. Some pirates formed bottle funds, a shared stash to buy group luxuries, like better hammocks or imported cheeses. Of course, these funds often fell apart after someone dipped into the pot for emergency dice therapy. Still, the idea of pirate mutual funds is not as absurd as it sounds. In fact, on some ships, the quartermaster maintained a crew welfare chest. Not out of kindness, but necessity. Injuries were common, and treatment cost coin. A tooth extraction? 3 pieces. Amputation? 5, and you keep the limb. Dental floss made from sail thread? Priceless. You once saw a pirate who spent his entire earnings on a carved ivory leg. It squeaked every step, but looked spectacular. He named it Sir Marchington. But what about inflation? Ah yes, the changing value of goods was a real issue. Rum might cost 1 coin in Havana, but 2 in Tortuga. And in desperate times, the crew bartered. Salted cod for soap, beads for boots. Once, a man traded his share of loot for a working compass. No regrets, until he dropped it in a stew pot. You glance over at a nearby sailor counting coins into tiny piles. Food, drink, gear, pet rat upgrade. He notices you watching and nods solemnly. Lot of profit in educated rodents. He murmurs, you don't ask. Despite the chaos, a strange truth emerges. Pirates were better at personal finance than many land-based folks. No credit cards, no interest rates, no surprise charges. What you had, you used or you lost. And accountability came not from monthly statements, but from the crew. Forget your debts too often, and you're cleaning the latrine with a barnacle toothbrush. Night falls again. Lanterns swing gently from the beams. You hear the clink of coins being sorted, the scratch of notes on parchment, the murmur of arguments over how much to spend on cannon oil. You curl up in your hammock, thinking about your own little stash. 3 coins, a broken comb, and 1 highly suspicious raisin cake you've been saving. You're not rich, but you're afloat, alive, and surprisingly well-versed in 18th century economic improvisation. As you drift off, you wonder what modern accountants would make of this ship, probably ask for a raise. You wake to the rhythm of waves slapping the hull, but this morning, there's something else, an unmistakable clatter from the galley. Wooden bowls, metal spoons, and 1 very loud belch. Breakfast, if you can call it that. Your stomach growls as you pull yourself upright, already imagining the glories of sea biscuits, salted pork, and maybe, just maybe, an onion half that hasn't begun sprouting another onion. But today's not about food. Not really. Today, the Quartermaster is auditing the ship's supplies. And that means every pirate's personal rum stash is under review. You trail behind the others toward the quarterdeck, where barrels have been rolled out for inspection. There's a nervous energy in the air. Not fear. Exactly. More like what you'd feel lining up for a dentist who might also be a knife juggler. Pirates didn't just drink rum. They budgeted it. And they did it with a level of seriousness that might surprise you. Each crew member received a daily ration, usually a half pint, though this varied by ship and availability. If the rum ran low, moods grew mutinous fast to prevent hoarding. Or worse, cheating. The Quartermaster sometimes held surprise audits. You watch as crew members bring out their personal flasks, bottles, and, in one case, a hollowed-out prosthetic arm filled with spiced grog. Keeps it warm. The owner explains, flexing the fingers with a squish. You hand over your own humble bottle. It's half full, which earns you a nod of approval. Conserving rum is seen as wise, unless you're accused of hiding extra in your boots. One pirate had custom saws made just to carry miniature flasks. Got caught when he started listing heavily to the left. Now, here's the thing. Rum wasn't just for fun. It was a form of currency, medicine, and even morale insurance. Have a cut that looks suspiciously green? Rum. Feeling seasick? Rum. Need to bribe the cook for slightly less moldy bread? Rum. Forget your duties and anger the first mate? Offer rum. Pray its strong point. One lesser-known tradition was the rum pardon. If you messed up, broke something, insulted someone's parrot, forgot to tie a rope, you could offer part of your rum ration as a peace offering. Not always accepted, but often appreciated. Some crews even had designated rum jars, where apologies were stored, metaphorically and literally. Of course, things could go sideways. A pirate named Gills, so nicknamed because of his unnatural ability to chug underwater, once drank an entire week's ration in a single morning. For the rest of the week, he swabbed the deck using only his mustache and a regretful attitude. Historians still argue whether rum audits were genuinely about fairness or just another way to embarrass the greedy. The answer probably lies somewhere in the sticky, sugarcane-scented middle. As you continue watching the audit unfold, one pirate tries to defend a suspiciously large barrel marked buttons. The quartermaster opens it. Not a single button. Just rum. The man shrugs. "I'm investing in liquid assets," he says. There's laughter, but also respect. Creative budgeting is admired here. Just don't get caught skimming from the communal barrel. That's a hanging offense. Or, on this ship, 3-day hammock suspension. Literally suspended from the rigging in your hammock like a particularly guilty chandelier. Then there are the flavor fanatics. Some pirates didn't just drink rum, they infused it. Citrus peels, cloves, ginger. One man swore by pickled eel, said it brought out the vanilla. He died with an odd smile and very few mourners. You overhear 2 crewmen discussing today's ration. One swapping his half pint for a better spot in the sleeping quarters. The other is pooling rations to celebrate his unbirthday, which he insists occurs twice a month. Technically not wrong. Spiritually questionable. You recall the unofficial rum economy rules. 1 ration equals 1 minor favor. 2 rations equals you don't have to swab anything that day. 3 rations equals full back massage and first pick of breakfast. 4 rations equals someone will pretend to be your lawyer at your next disciplinary hearing. The quartermaster marks down your amount in the logbook, a thick leather tome that smells faintly of citrus, ink, and despair. He's surprisingly fair, even-handed. You wonder if he once worked as an accountant before choosing this less stable, but infinitely salter career path. What makes rum so essential? It kept water drinkable. Stored in casks, it lasted far longer than plain water and didn't grow slimy with algae quite so fast. Some captains issued grog, a mixture of rum and water, to reduce drunkenness, though the result was more a mild haze than outright sobriety. It was also a social tool. Celebrations, victories, birthdays, and new tattoos all called for a drink. Or 2, or 6. Pirates formed tighter bonds over shared bottles than shared stories. A man might not remember your name, but he'd remember you gave him your last swig before the storm hit. You remember one evening, moonbright, sea calm. A crewmate named Clara pulled out her secret stash and passed it around while reciting Shakespeare. Badly. Still, it brought the crew to tears. Probably because the rum was also infused with ghost-peppered. As the audit concludes, the barrels are returned, and the crew disperses, some relieved, others plotting new hiding spots. You find yourself proud. You managed your ration well. You didn't bribe anyone. You didn't hoard. You even avoided drinking out of desperation. That one night the ship's musician tried to start a sea shanty opera. Night sets in again. You tuck your bottle away behind the loose plank beneath your hammock. Not hidden, just safe. And as the ship sways gently, you realize that in a world without banks, passwords, or savings accounts, your bottle of rum is both vault and comfort. You close your eyes, listening to the familiar clink of bottles, the lazy strum of a cracked lute, and the steady breath of a crew that survived another day. Tomorrow, the rum ration resets, and with it, the delicate balance of economy and indulgence continues. It's nearing midnight when you feel a tap on your shoulder. Not the jarring kind, More like a gentle reminder from a friend who doesn't want to startle you, but still thinks you should be awake for this. You sit up slowly. The air is thick with salt and the lingering sweetness of rum. Around you, hammocks sway in gentle unison like lazy metronomes. Most of the crew is asleep or pretending to be, except for a small cluster gathered on the weather deck. You follow the flicker of lamplight and hushed voices until you reach them. There, under the dim orange glow, sits a pirate named Ledger. No one remembers his real name. Everyone remembers the books he kept. Tonight, it seems, Ledger's running a quiet game of pirate poker, and the stakes aren't coins, but rum. You take a seat, still half drowsy, and glance at the circle. It's an odd group. One sailor with a pet crab perched on his shoulder, another polishing a dagger that might be older than the ship, and a third, wide-eyed and muttering odds under his breath. Ledger deals cards carved from scraps of wood, each with hand-drawn suits, swords, ships, barrels, and the occasional angry mermaid. The rules change nightly, but the principle remains: wager your unused rum ration. Win, and you walk away with more than your fair share for the week. Lose, and you'll be begging for citrus peel by Thursday. You hesitate. Risk your hard-earned half-pint. The bottle hidden behind your hammock plank glows in your mind's eye like buried treasure. But then again, you didn't survive a sea battle and 2 weeks of hardtack to hoard comfort. You slide a small bottle into the center of the circle. I'm in. And so begins the underground economy of rum gambling, an unofficial tradition aboard many pirate ships, though rarely written about. Historians still argue whether these midnight games were tolerated, encouraged, or strictly forbidden, depending on the captain's temperament. Evidence suggests all three. Tonight's game is barrel bluff, a mix of luck, bravado, and suspicious glances. You can win with a strong hand, sure, or you can win by convincing everyone else you have won. The crab blinks slowly. You take that as a sign. First round, you bluff. Second round, you actually win. Third round, the angry mermaid card shows up, which means you have to compliment your opponent or forfeit. You tell a one-eyed sailor his hat makes him look poetic. He tears up. Around you, laughter bubbles up in low waves. The game softens something in the crew. The usual tension, the bickering over chores, the occasional near duel over who left a fish in the lantern locker, melts away in shared mischief that it's not just a game. It's therapy. Rum-funded therapy. Ledger tells a story as he deals the next hand. About a ship he once served on where the captain banned rum poker outright. So the crew invented code games, games where you bet favors and secrets instead. One man owed another 12 minutes of sincere eye contact. Things got weird. The crab scuttles across the table. It pinches a card, and everyone nods solemnly. The crab plays now. You ask the wide-eyed man why he mutters numbers. He says he's counting the probability of certain cards appearing. You ask if it helps. He shrugs. Not really, but it keeps the ghosts at bay. You nod. Fair. By the fourth hand, the stakes are getting serious. Someone throws in a spoonful of sugar. Someone else wagers a week's worth of hammock fluffing. One brave soul offers up their turn to steer the ship, assuming, of course, they win. And then comes a risky moment. Ledger raises the pot with something new. A small scroll tied with red string. What's that? Someone whispers. A map, Ledger says. Not treasure, not gold, but something worth finding. He won't say more. You eye the scroll. The temptation is real, but you hold back. A good gambler knows when to fold, and more importantly, when to nap. You bow out of the round, sipping the edge of your rum bottle as the others squabble over the map's value. Eventually, the crab wins. No one questions it. The crab always wins. The game winds down, laughter replaced by yawns. Bottles are returned, some heavier, some heartbreakingly light. The crew disperses in small groups, leaning on one another, humming unfinished sea shanties that no one remembers how to end. You remain for a moment, sitting cross-legged on the deck, watching the stars. The ship creaks in rhythm. The moon hangs low like it's eavesdropping, and somewhere below deck, someone is snoring a full octave too high to in this strange life, surrounded by criminals, poets, and part-time crustacean gamblers. Rum becomes more than a drink. It's tradition. It's leverage. It's the currency of friendship and the occasional awkward compliment. You finally return to your hammock, tuck in your bottle, and feel the weight of the night settle over you like a heavy blanket. The kind of blanket that smells faintly of smoke, citrus, and spilled dreams. And as you drift towards sleep, you think, not for the first time, that pirate poker might be the purest form of economics ever invented, especially when the crab is the banker. The morning creeps in slowly, like a cat that knows it's not really welcome. Pale gold light filters through the sails as the sea murmurs its usual nonsense. You roll out of your hammock, head a touch foggy, but with the distinct feeling that you did, in fact, lose a game of poker to a crab. You stretch, yawn, and listen as the deck begins to stir. Footsteps, groans, a sneeze so violent it rattles the biscuit barrel. Somewhere, someone's singing about a goat named Penelope. Standard start to a pirate's day, but today, there's talk of inventory. That means it's time to do something all pirates dread. Log the rum. You drag your boots toward the hold. The quartermaster is already there, standing beside the barrels with a look of grim responsibility. He's one of the few aboard who can read, write, and still do basic arithmetic after 2 drinks. A rare and valuable commodity. His name is Sam, but everyone calls him Tally. He's got a ledger, a quill, and a suspiciously unblinking stare. You nod politely. He does not nod back. "Time to check the stocks," he mutters. "Last week we were 7 pints short." You make a noise that's halfway between a grunt and a shrug. You're not sure if that's a comment or an accusation. The barrels are open one by one. Tally inserts a narrow, carved stick into each, checking levels like a baker checking cake doneness. He scribbles notes in the ledger, sighs dramatically, and moves to the next. You ask, casually, "Why not just count the barrels?" He blinks. "And trust no one siphoned from the bottom with a reed. You sweet summer fool." You quietly move a suspicious reed behind a crate as the inspection drags on. You learn the surprisingly strict rules behind pirate rum inventory. Each crew member's ration is recorded daily, usually by the quartermaster or a chosen rum monitor. Miss a day due to illness, discipline, or getting dramatically distracted by a dolphin. You don't get double the next day. Sorry, there are debates, naturally. Historians still argue whether these logs were kept consistently or whether some crews just eyeballed it. Some say there were even decoy barrels, one filled with actual rum, the rest filled with briny water and dead ants to discourage theft. You lean against a barrel. It's cool and heavy, like a secret that doesn't want to be told. Tally continues to log numbers and grumble about the incident with the lemur and the measuring cup. You do not ask. Inventory isn't just about keeping things fair. It's about survival. On long voyages, mismanaging rum could lead to mutiny faster than a slap fight over the last lemon wedge. Rationing wasn't always equal. Senior officers, valued gunners, or exceptionally charismatic banjo players often got a little more. Meanwhile, troublemakers might find their allotment mysteriously evaporated. You help Tally check the final barrel, the one tucked behind the crate of spoiled onions. It's nearly empty, which he writes down with a theatrical sigh and a circle so aggressive you worry the ink might burn through the page. Then comes the tally sheet. Each crew member's name, days, measurements, notes like spilled during storm, borrowed by Cookie for flambe, or the dreaded confiscated, drunken climbing again. You see your own name. Neat handwriting, mostly normal entries. Then, a curious one, shared portion with Parrot. You glance at Tally. He doesn't look up. Next comes distribution planning. Today's supplies aren't just handed out willy-nilly. They're assigned based on behavior, upcoming duties, and mysterious calculations known only to Tally. A man with a mop might get more rum than a man on cannon duty, simply because no one wants a tipsy cannon loader. As Tally closes the book, you ask him how he keeps it all straight. He taps his temple. Math, memory, and fear. Mostly fear. Outside, the sun is climbing. The deck is alive with movement. Ropes, sails, squabbling over breakfast biscuits. You carry a small bottle marked with your name, still slightly warm from sitting beside a lantern. It smells sharp, sweet, and faintly like something once fermented in a boot. You sip, carefully. Not too much. This has to last. Suddenly, a shout from the crow's nest. Sails on the horizon. The crew rushes to their stations. Excitement, nerves, a general sense of, please don't be the Navy. Tally closes his ledger with a soft thud. If we live through this, he mutters, we'll need to recalculate. You laugh, or maybe cough. Hard to tell. And as the ship turns toward the approaching vessel, sails snapping like applause, you feel oddly comforted knowing that someone's tracking the rum. That's somewhere below the chaos, in a book bound with salt and stubbornness. Your tiny bottle has a name, because on a pirate ship, you might not have laws. But you have ledgers. You have rituals. You have exactly one person who can spell allocation on the first try, and that, somehow, makes you feel safe. The enemy ship is closing in, though enemy might be an overstatement. Through the spyglass, you spot a vessel that appears to be slightly confused, slightly off course, and more than slightly on fire. You lower the lens and squint. Yep, that's Smoke. Your captain, a man who answers only to the name Spatula, scratches his beard and mutters, that ship looks about one bad sneeze away from sinking. You nod thoughtfully. So we're still going after it. He blinks. Obviously, as orders are barked and sails shift, you, faithful inventory assistant and part-time cannon rope untangler, brace yourself for whatever nonsense the day will bring. Spoiler, it brings trade. Once the two ships close distance, it becomes clear this is no naval threat. It's a merchant vessel with a leaking hull, a panicked crew, and an urgent need for assistance. The kind of folks who trade their entire cinnamon stockpile for just a few barrels of drinking water. Or, say rum. Enter the pirate economy. This, dear sleeper, is the part they never put in movies. The haggling, the weighing of resources, the booze-based barter system that often decided a ship's fate. Pirates didn't just steal, they traded, too. Not in gold coins and fancy bills, but in the language of need. You give me 2 pounds of peppercorns and a musket that only misfires sometimes, and I'll give you half a barrel of rum and 3 crates of worm-resistant hardtack at a fair trade. If you ask me, you board the merchant ship cautiously. It smells of mildew and desperation. Their quartermaster, a wiry man with an unfortunate mustache, greets you with visible relief. You wouldn't happen to have any spirits, would you? You pretend to ponder. Possibly. Depends. What do you got? Over the next hour, the two crews negotiate with all the flair of street magicians. Bottles are sniffed. Musket barrels are tapped. Someone tries to pay with a basket of suspiciously aggressive chickens. You are offered a hat made entirely of lace. You politely decline. The rum, it turns out, is liquid currency. In ports where coinage meant little and reputation meant everything, a barrel of decent rum could get you food, tools, or even temporary passage on a better ship. Rum wasn't just comfort, it was leverage. Historians still argue whether pirates had set conversion rates, like 1 barrel of rum equals 3 pistols and a slap on the back, or whether it was all spontaneous wheeling and dealing. Either way, it required a keen sense of value and the ability to lie convincingly while smiling. Your captain, who is very good at both, ends up trading a quarter barrel for a new sail, some oars, and an entire sack of dried apricots. You're not sure where those came from or why they smell like fish, but it's a win nonetheless. Back on your ship, you help stow the goods. The apricots go below deck. The sail goes up. The merchant ship, patched and grateful, sails off in a zigzag that is either celebratory or just really bad steering. You flop onto a crate and sigh. Trading is exhausting. Then the real work begins. Anytime you gain rum, it has to be recorded. You follow Tally down to the hold, where he inspects the barrel like it just confessed to a minor crime. He marks the volume, notes the origin, acquired via exchange, merchant vessel, possibly cursed, and assigns a projected ration lifespan. Then comes the adjustment. The crew ledger must be updated. Shares recalculated. If you got half a barrel, that's enough to add a few sips per day or extend the current rations another week. Tally mutters as he recalculates in the margins, grumbling about cubic volumes and honor among scoundrels. You peek over his shoulder. The math is messy but functional. You recognize your name, again with the same odd note, shared with Parrot. You look up. The Parrot, perched smugly on a beam above, tilts its head and says, "I paid in walnuts." Of course it did. This moment of calm is when the crew starts asking questions. Can we get more now? Do we celebrate the trade? Is there enough for the Saturday punch bowl? The answer is always the same, not until it's divided, because every bottle must be filtered, sometimes literally, depending on what might have fallen in, labeled, and marked for rationing. Tally's job isn't glamorous, but it is sacred. He reminds everyone that pirates who drink too much end up either overboard, in a duel, or with a new tattoo they don't remember agreeing to. Still, a little celebration isn't unheard of. That night, a small amount is distributed early, enough for a trade toast. You hold your cup high, clink with a crewmate who smells strongly of vinegar, and sip something that tastes like regret with hints of oak. Around the fire pit, stories are swapped. Tales of past trades. Rum for cannonballs, rum for goats, rum for maps that led nowhere but still looked convincing. You even hear of a pirate who once exchanged rum for a haunted compass. It only pointed towards sad memories. Pirates may have been outlaws, but they knew value. They knew that every object, every sip, every strange item wrapped in burlap could be the key to survival. Or, at the very least, a decent story later as the stars blink into view. You lie back and listen to the murmurs. The night is calm, the breeze kind. A barrel of rum has become a sail. A cup of courage has patched a leaking ship. And as the fire crackles low, you feel a quiet pride. In this floating mess of rope, tar, and snoring pirates, you helped broker a deal, not with gold, not with blood, but with patience, negotiation, and an extremely questionable apricot sack. Tomorrow, the wind will shift. The sails will rise. And somewhere in the hold, a half barrel of rum will wait, waiting to be measured, poured, and possibly argued over. But tonight, it rests. And so do you. Morning sunlight slices through the crooked seams of the captain's cabin, and the ship stirs with that unmistakable rhythm of hangovers and half-remembered dancing. You sit up slowly, your back against a bag of potatoes that somehow made its way onto the deck during last night's modest toast. The parrot greets you with a squawk. Apricot. Yep, still haunting you. As you shuffle toward the galley, you overhear a familiar phrase muttered among crewmates. Something like, "That's not your share, mate. Check the ledger." Ah yes, the most sacred text aboard any pirate ship, the rum ration logbook. This unassuming, stained, and often sticky notebook is the glue that holds the whole operation together. It details everything from how much rum is left, to who's due their daily ration, to disciplinary reductions. Yes, rum could be docked for bad behavior. This isn't just bookkeeping. This is rum justice. Tally's already up, predictably grumpy, hunched over the log like a monk guarding ancient secrets. You peer over his shoulder. He's updating the morning's entries. Tiny crosshatches for each crew member, marked with their nickname, bunk number, and any recent infractions. One-eyed Terry, half rationed today, still recovering from goat incident. You don't ask. Now, here's something weird. The log has a column for mood. Not just yours, everyone's. A single word to describe how a pirate's been feeling lately. Anxious, sullen, too jolly. The idea, it seems, is that the quartermaster adjusts the strength or dilution of the rum depending on the general morale. Historians still argue whether these mood columns were serious management tools or just a passive-aggressive joke by ship scribes. Either way, they worked. Tally believed in keeping a ship not just afloat, but emotionally balanced. "A sad crew mutinies," he once said. "A happy crew sings sea shanties. A drunk crew dances into the sea." Today's mood? Mildly optimistic. That gets you a slightly stronger pour. As you line up with your tin cup, the ritual begins. A small ladle is dipped into the communal barrel, poured with reverence into your vessel, and handed off without ceremony. No eye contact, just the soft slosh of diluted history. Yes, diluted, because, contrary to every pirate movie, daily rum wasn't full strength. It was usually mixed with water to make grog. The reason? Well, partly to stretch the supply, partly to prevent full-on chaos, and partly because drinking straight rum all day under the tropical sun leads to behavior not even a parrot could excuse. The typical ratio was 4 parts water to 1 part rum, though it varied. Sometimes citrus juice was added to prevent scurvy. Sometimes sugar or spices were tossed in, depending on what the ship had in the pantry, or more likely, what it had traded poorly for last week. Remember the cinnamon incident? As you sip your morning grog, the warm bitterness settles into your chest like a sigh. It's not pleasant exactly, but it's reliable, comforting in a weird, damp way. The taste of survival. The taste of consistency in a floating life of endless drift. The crew disperses. Some go about repairs, some fish off the stern, a few play a slow-moving dice game that seems to have no actual rules. You're handed a bucket. Great. It's bilge cleaning day. Hours pass. The sun climbs. And then, just before lunch, a small cheer goes up from the lookout. Island. That's right. A chance for fresh trade, perhaps shore leave. Maybe even the rarest treasure of all, new rum. The captain calls a meeting. Spatula, as always, begins with a joke that lands like a wet cannonball, then gets serious. We're low on citrus. The apricots are suspicious, and the rum barrel has a crack. Everyone gasps. Tally faints, just a little. This is a crisis. You can't lose a barrel mid-voyage. It'll leak, rot, or worse, spoil. The captain assigns a team, you included, of course, to go ashore, inspect the market, and find a new cask, preferably one not previously used to store fish or paint. When you land, the island turns out to be one of those sun-baked outposts where time seems to nap in a hammock. The trading post is run by a woman known only as Annie Bean, who offers you a cracked molasses barrel and 2 weathered crates of dried lime slices before you even say hello. Negotiations commence. You trade away some of your questionable apricots and a small piece of your ship's old sail. Turns out Annie Bean collects textiles and walk away with a gorgeous, solid oak barrel smelling faintly of almonds. Could be worse. Historians still argue whether pirate land purchases were formally recorded or simply governed by shouting and handshakes. But in places like this, barter was everything. And if rum wasn't the item being exchanged, it was almost always the goal. With your new cask rolled back to the dinghy, the crew gives you a hero's welcome. Tally blesses the barrel like a priest at sea. It's rinsed, sealed, and carefully refilled from the old one. A tiny ceremony is held. The parrot says grace. Then, naturally, comes the updating of the ledger. New container logged. Volume confirmed. Mood updated. Relieved. Rations recalculated that it's all routine now. This odd marriage of accounting and debauchery. Every cup poured is counted. Every cup skipped is recorded. And every celebration, no matter how small, is carefully balanced against the cold reality of the rum supply. You end the day lying on the deck, watching clouds drift like sails across a painted sky. Below you, in the cool belly of the ship, your new oak barrel rests in its cradle. Safe, steady, smelling faintly of almonds and possibility. Tomorrow, it will be tapped. But tonight, it simply waits. And you do too. Eyes fluttering closed, the taste of grog still faint on your tongue. The ledger hums with its silent order. And somewhere in your dreams, the parrot whispers, Apricot. Morning arrives again, soft light bleeding through the cracks of the hull, the familiar creak of the ship's bones reminding you that you're still afloat, and mercifully, still not in charge of anything. You stretch, careful not to jostle the nearby coil of rope someone apparently decided was a mattress last night. The air smells faintly of salt, wood oil, and warm citrus. That's right, the new barrel is holding beautifully. The day begins as usual. Tally's already hunched over his ledger. Captain Spatula is humming off-key near the helm, and the cook is banging pots together in what can only be described as culinary aggression. But today's rum topic isn't about distribution or even celebration. It's about what happens when things go wrong. You see, for every glorious toast or lazy afternoon sip, there are moments where rum becomes the center of conflict. And on a pirate ship, conflict can go sideways faster than a weevil enflowered at your summoned mid-biscuit chew to the quarterdeck, where Spatula is scowling over a half-empty tin cup. Short pour, he growls. Again. Tally blinks. No, Captain. It's to the line. And sure enough, he shows the log. Each crew member gets the same amount. Same dilution, same cup, except this one, apparently it's not the first time. Someone's been tampering, dipping into the ration barrel when no one's watching. Maybe using a straw, maybe siphoning with a hollow spoon. However they're doing it, it's screwing up the measurements. And on a pirate ship, that's a crime just shy of mutiny to what happens when rum goes missing. Pirate justice isn't quite what you'd imagine. Forget the Hollywood image of instant keel hauling or dramatic sword fights on the deck. Most pirate crews operated under a surprisingly democratic code. And when rum was stolen, the code kicked in like clockwork. First came the accusation. Names were never spoken lightly. If you blamed someone without proof, and they turned out to be innocent, you could be the one swabbing the bilge for a month. So instead, the crew gathers quietly. Observations are shared. Who lingered near the barrel too long? Who was suspiciously jolly yesterday? Then comes the inspection. You and a few crewmates are chosen as neutral parties. Though let's be real, you're mostly here for the drama. You check the barrel, look for false bottoms or hidden valves. You even inspect cups, measuring them to see if someone's carved a little cavity into the base to sneak extra. In today's case, the culprit leaves behind the smoking gun, a straw. Not just any straw, a bamboo reed, carved thin and left tucked behind a crate. Rookie mistake. Now the crew has to decide punishment. It's not about violence. This isn't a Royal Navy ship. It's about equity. Everyone's ration is sacred. If one pirate gets more than their share, it unbalances everything. From mood to morale to future budgeting. They vote. Punishment. The culprit, we'll call him Toothless Jim, because, well, loses half his ration for a week. Even worse, he has to refill the barrel by bartering at the next port. That means giving up personal loot, his stash of sea glass beads and a small bronze figurine he's been hoarding since Honduras. Jim doesn't argue. He nods, accepts it, because the code was clear: steal rum, and you make it right. Historians still argue whether these punishments were always this fair, or whether some captains took a more dramatic approach. But there are logs and testimonies from sailors who insist pirate ships were often more just and less cruel than many naval vessels of the time. Meanwhile, the rest of the crew turns the event into an opportunity for comedy. That night, everyone sips their rations with over-the-top theatrical flair. Tastes like honesty, someone shouts. Delicious, crime-free rum, says another. Even the parrot gets in on it. Nostraw. You can't help but chuckle. Pirate justice may be unconventional, but it works. The balance is restored. Trust mended with citrus, water, and time. But here's where things get even more interesting. On some ships, a theft like Jim's wouldn't just trigger punishment. It might change the entire budgeting system. You see, in response to scarcity or misbehavior, some captains introduced a tiered rum system. Yes, like a frequent flyer program, but wetter. Level 1. Full rations, standard dilution. Level 2. Half rations with extra water. Level 3. Vinegar water as a warning. Tally, in his infinite creativity, once tried something he called the rum reputation score. Each crew member was secretly rated on a scale of 1 to 5 based on trustworthiness, tidiness, and how often they returned cups. The higher your score, the better your grog. Naturally, this caused chaos. Suddenly, pirates were helping each other clean up, smiling politely, complimenting spatula's cooking. It was terrifying. The system only lasted 2 days. Someone hacked their score with a smudged thumbprint, and Tally went back to his beloved equal pour philosophy. Still, it showed just how much power rum held over behavior. Later that evening, you're back on the deck, sipping your now fully accounted for ration under a sky smeared with stars. The mood is light. Toothless Jim is telling a very bad joke about parrots and pineapples, and no one's listening. And yet, beneath the jokes and laughter, you feel it, the quiet gravity of shared trust. Every crew member knows their cup is equal, that the system, strange as it is, works. It may be patched together with bamboo straws and wishful thinking, but it holds. You swirl your grog. Not because it's fancy, but because this drink, in all its watery, citrusy weirdness, represents something bigger than itself. Balance. Even pirates, it turns out, are creatures of order, especially when it comes to their rum. The moon is high again, reflecting soft ripples on the surface of the water as you sit by the railing, cup in hand. The day's squabble over the rum thief has died down, leaving a strangely peaceful quiet on board. You take a sip, just the right strength, just the right warmth, and let your thoughts wander back in time to how this whole system even came to be. You might think pirates just drank rum, but before that could happen, someone had to get it. Which means it's time we talk about pirate logistics. Specifically, how they bought, traded, or, let's be honest, acquired their rum in the first place. Now, buying rum wasn't always straightforward. Pirates weren't welcome everywhere, after all. So securing a steady supply took more than coins. It took relationships. Strange as it sounds, pirates often built intricate networks with merchants, plantation owners, and even corrupt colonial officials. They were like awkward, sticky-fingered diplomats. You disembark in Jamaica, Port Royal, the Las Vegas of the Caribbean. And yes, there's rum here. So much of it, the air smells fermented. But walking into a tavern with gold coins and an eye patch doesn't guarantee service. No, you've got to negotiate. Or better yet, bring something valuable to trade. Sometimes it's gold or sugar. Sometimes it's silk lifted from a Spanish galleon. But occasionally, especially if supplies are tight, you end up bartering with things like dried fish, stolen maps, or even chickens. Yes, pirates traded chickens for rum. And parrots. One desperate crew once swapped an entire cannonball supply for 2 casks of spiced rum. Historians still argue whether that was strategic genius or outright lunacy. Then there's the issue of trust. Say you find a merchant who's willing to deal. They pour the rum, you hand over your coin. But what's stopping them from watering it down? Or worse, slipping you a barrel of molasses water and telling you it's extra mellow-aged reserve. This is where pirates got creative. Some ships employed tasters, crew members with the very serious job of testing the goods. The more experienced the palate, the better. If the taster raised an eyebrow or, heaven forbid, spat it out, the deal was off. Violence occasionally followed. In fact, you may recall old Peg-Leg Darby, a pirate known less for his swashbuckling and more for his astonishingly refined palate. He once claimed he could taste the sugarcane field where a rum was born. Pretentious? Yes, but effective. Darby's skills helped his crew score better rum on multiple voyages. He even insisted on swirling and sniffing before approving any trade. It earned him a few eye rolls, sure, but also a permanent spot at the negotiation table. Back on board, once the rum was secured, it had to be transported and stored. Another headache entirely. Rum barrels, especially full ones, are heavy. We're talking back-breaking, ship-tilting kind of heavy. So crews had to balance cargo, distributing weight so the ship didn't lean awkwardly and risk capsizing in rough waters. There's also the minor detail that rum is, technically, flammable. Keep it too close to the cooking fire, and well, let's just say no one wants a flaming barrel of 80-proof regret exploding mid-sea. Some ships built special compartments for the rum casks, lined with wet cloth or surrounded by water barrels to reduce fire risk. Others just hoped nothing sparked. And then there were the pirates who tried to make their own. Yes, believe it or not, a few especially crafty crews attempted shipboard distillation. Imagine a bunch of barely sober sailors setting up makeshift stills in the belly of a wooden ship. What could go wrong? Everything. One infamous experiment ended with the cook's beard catching fire and half the deck reeking of burnt banana peels for a week. It turns out, without proper fermentation knowledge, or, say, sobriety, distilling rum is less science, more very loud disaster. Still, some persisted. They used old copper pots, makeshift pipes, and tropical fruits to flavor their creations. Mango rum, pineapple rum, even coconut rind rum. Most of it tasted like regret and rope grease, but occasionally a batch turned out decent enough to sip without gagging. These attempts at self-sufficiency weren't just foolish tinkering. They reflected a real fear. What if we can't get more? Rum wasn't just pleasure. It was morale, medicine, currency, and culture. Without it, a pirate crew could spiral into tension, suspicion, or just plain misery. Historians still debate the extent to which pirate captains planned for these shortages in advance. Some accounts suggest elaborate supply routes and multi-port schedules, while others describe a more reactive approach: steal when low, drink when high. Repeat as necessary. Point 1 logbook from 1723 details a captain who scheduled their entire Caribbean loop around rum availability. Not gold, not loot. Rum. You might laugh, but it kept the crew happy and loyal. Meanwhile, on your ship, that lesson hasn't gone unnoticed. Tally's already scribbling next month's booze route, a detailed map connecting taverns, distilleries, and friendly traders across 5 islands. It looks like the world's weirdest treasure map, with annotations like excellent cinnamon punch, avoid parrots, and old woman with bucket equals secret supplier. You sigh? The effort it takes just to sip rum on a Tuesday night. And yet, it's worth it, because every step, every barter, every sneaky trade, every sketchy coconut still explosion shaped the culture of the pirate world. These weren't just rum-chugging brigands. They were traders, negotiators, and logistics experts with a surprising knack for supply chain management. Okay, maybe not experts, but passionate amateurs, at least. You take one last look at the stars and finish your drink. Somewhere out there, another pirate ship is haggling over a barrel. Another taster is swishing grog in their cheeks like a wine critic. And another crew is weighing their last cannonball against the chance for just one more sip of sweet, smoky rum. You smile. Because on the sea, in the world of pirates, rum isn't just a drink. It's a journey. You stretch your legs along the damp wooden planks of the quarterdeck, the scent of salt and oak rum lingering in the air like a ghost from last night's fireless feast. It's quiet now, just the creak of the ship and the occasional squawk of a seabird pretending to be more important than it is. And as you stare out at the never-ending blue, one thought surfaces like driftwood bobbing into view. Someone had to keep track of all this rum. Enter the pirate bookkeepers, really. Pirates, those rum-swilling rogues with missing teeth and odd hats, had accountants. Not the powdered wig, tax code type, mind you, but ledger keepers, scribblers, and quill-wielding calculators who made sure your beloved bottle of spiced Caribbean comfort didn't mysteriously vanish overnight. Without them, rum wouldn't last a week. Imagine yourself walking below deck, past a tangle of hammocks and hanging sausages, until you reach a small, candlelit nook. There sits Tally again, our quartermaster, sure, but also the one with the sharpest pencil and the best memory for exactly who drank what. He keeps a book. More like a journal, really, with faded leather binding and pages stained by rain, sweat, and something that might be fish oil. Inside are scribbles only he can decipher. Columns of names, measurements, little skull marks next to rule breakers. This, dear friend, is the rum ledger, a sacred, semi-soggy record of liquid assets. Now, don't picture perfect math. Pirate record-keeping was a chaotic dance between necessity and creativity. Fractions were approximate. Units were flexible. A gulp might be one measure, a generous pour another. Historians still argue whether pirate ships used standard volume units at all, or just invented their own as they went along. One bootful appears in a surviving log. We assume it wasn't metric, but even with imprecision, the intent was clear: fairness. Every crew member had a share. Everyone's name went in the book. Even animals occasionally got listed. There's one instance of a monkey on a Jamaican sloop reportedly owed half a dram per day for good morale. Whether it drank or just spilled it is lost to history. Tally's job wasn't just about portions, though. He also tracked barrel aging, spillage, and theft. Because, oh yes, rum went missing. Constantly. Sometimes it was evaporation, wooden barrels breathe, after all. But more often, it was sneaky swigs. A quartermaster had to be part sommelier, part detective, and part schoolteacher watching a room of toddlers near an open cookie jar, and heaven help the sailor caught double-dipping. One particularly clever thief, known only as Slim, once drilled a tiny hole into the bottom of a rum barrel, inserted a straw, and sipped underneath while pretending to scrub the deck. It worked until the straw snapped and he nearly drowned in a slow, sticky leak. Justice was swift. They made him mop up the entire hold with his shirt and drink only water for a week. A brutal sentence, indeed. Of course, keeping records also helped with planning and survival. Knowing how much rum was left meant knowing how far you could sail without mutiny. A ship might pass up treasure if it meant stopping at an island with a distillery. As absurd as that sounds, one Spanish logbook describes a pirate crew raiding a plantation just for the distiller's yeast. Bold, chaotic, but weirdly strategic. Tally even color-coded his entries. Red ink for punishment rations, blue for celebrations, gold wax seals when an entire new barrel was opened. An event met with cheers and occasionally tears. There's a kind of reverence to it, like opening a new cask of rum marked the passage of time. Birthdays, victories, the end of storms. And yes, there were special days. Half rum day, when supplies were low. Full rum day, when they weren't. No rum day, which was only uttered in whispers and remembered as a time of deep emotional trauma. Historians still argue whether these named days were codified or just spontaneous crew traditions, but one thing is certain. Everyone knew what day it was based on what was in their cup. Occasionally, pirates left messages in bottles. Some were treasure maps. Others were just angry rants about watered-down grog. One even contained a full ration schedule written in rhyme, ending with the line, "And if the rum's gone, ye best not look / for I've taken the ledger and jumped off the hook." It's these little moments, these delicate scratches of ink on parchment, that remind you pirates weren't just brawlers and brutes. They were organizers, tally keepers, archivists of indulgence. They cared about equity, even if their methods were soaked in sarcasm and sweat. They knew that a fair rum share meant a peaceful ship, and a peaceful ship meant survival. You glance at Tally now, curled in the corner with his book open, candle flickering near the edge of sleep. He's sketching a new column, something about Sunday night sip credits. You're not sure what it means, but you appreciate the effort. Outside, the ship rocks gently, as if acknowledging the care it takes to manage chaos. Your own cup sits beside you, half full, carefully measured. You don't know if you'll get more tomorrow or if it's a no-rum Tuesday, but for now, you're content, because somewhere, tucked between salt-crusted pages, is proof that you mattered, that you were seen, measured, rationed, and remembered in the strange little history of seafaring rebellion. And with that, your eyes grow heavy, not from drink, but from the slow rhythm of numbers, the tender tallying of a pirate's needs. You wake, not sharply, not suddenly, but the way a ship rocks a dreamer out of sleep, and stretch beneath the frayed wool blanket someone probably stole from a British merchant navy officer 3 years ago. Around you, the hum of the sea is quiet today, still, as if the ocean itself is pausing to let you reflect. You're thinking now about what happens when the rum runs out, or worse, when it's ruined. Because if there's one thing more tragic than a dry barrel, it's a spoiled one. Let's talk about it. The catastrophes, the miscalculations, the heartbreaking tragedies of rum spoilage, contamination, and yes, fermentation gone rogue. These moments were rare, but when they came, they were remembered like battle losses. So, picture this: a cask of beautiful, deep amber Caribbean rum sealed tight, with oak staves and tar, bobbing peacefully in the ship's dark hold. All's well, until someone forgets to secure it before a storm. The barrel cracks, salt water floods the hold, and just like that, a week's worth of morale vanishes into a briny soup that not even the boldest sailor will sip. One old log refers to this sad potion as Poseidon's punch, and it's described as vile, bitter, and capable of curing sobriety for a full week. Now, if you're wondering how often this kind of thing happened, it wasn't every voyage, but it wasn't rare either. Ships were floating disasters of mildew, pests, and poor sealing practices. Barrels swelled and split. Rats chewed through wooden staves like they were bread crusts. And worst of all, mold. Nothing strikes terror into a sailor's heart like cracking open a fresh cask only to find white fuzz blooming on top of his daily ration like some unholy meringue. Historians still argue whether pirates truly understood fermentation science or were just guided by taste, luck, and old sailors' tales. Some accounts suggest they knew to rotate barrels, keep them cool, and even sprinkle in herbs to preserve the spirit. Others describe methods that sound more like alchemy, stirring the rum counterclockwise under moonlight, whispering curses at the tap, or feeding a drop to a parrot to see if it squawked or fainted. One real fringe tidbit comes from a 1730s privateer's diary, which describes a superstition that a woman's glove hung over a rum barrel would ward off spoilage. Whether this worked, or just confused the glove's original owner, is unclear. You'd think, then, that spoiled rum was dumped overboard. Not so fast. On a pirate ship, waste was unthinkable. They would boil it, mix it with citrus, water it down, redistill it if they had the equipment, or just dare the most desperate crew member to drink it for a laugh. One story tells of a pirate named Gummy Ned who drank 3 cups of moldy rum, claimed it gave him visions of the Kraken, and was promoted shortly after. No one really knew why. Sometimes the problem wasn't spoilage, but sabotage. Yes, you heard that right. Rum poisoning. Not common, but it happened, especially when pirates took a ship without checking its stores carefully. A few navies began lacing their alcohol reserves with toxic additives in hopes of tricking boarding parties into drinking themselves to death. One French naval trap involved mixing arsenic into wine barrels and marking them with a subtle X. But some clever pirates knew this and passed the drink to prisoners first, waiting 10 minutes to see what happened. That brings us to testing. Before the first pour of a new barrel, a ritual began, the first sip ceremony. Someone, usually not the captain, would pour a tiny bit into a shell or tin cup and take a swig. If they grimaced, it was fine. If they screamed, it was vinegar. If they fell down, well, best to try another cask. You had tricks of your own, of course. Smell it, swirl it, hold it up to the lamplight, and look for cloudiness. Feel the weight in the cup. Some pirates even claimed that spoiled rum would sway slightly slower in the cup, like it was mourning its lost destiny. And when rum was genuinely lost, when no amount of boiling, praying, or filtering could save it, Then came the rum burial.it. Sounds like a joke, but at least 2 records describe ceremonies where pirates buried a barrel of bad rum at sea, wrapping it in sailcloth and gently lowering it into the water with a whispered toast. One eulogy went, "Ye were strong, ye were sweet, but ye died untrue. May Davy Jones make punch with thee." There was mourning, yes, but also resilience. Because even when the barrels betrayed you, there were always alternatives. Some pirates turned to fermented coconut juice, which was unpredictable and, by one account, smelled like goat breath soaked in sugar. Others tried pirate-made palm wine or a revolting mixture called sea brew, made from boiled rainwater, brown sugar, and whatever fruit hadn't rotted yet. You tried it once. You still remember. What you remember most, though, is that despite it all, pirates endured. Even in a world of leaky barrels, drunk monkeys, and suspiciously fizzy rum, they adapted. They watched. They took notes. Maybe not always accurate ones, but they learned. And the legend of the rum lived on. And so, as the ship lulls you once again towards sleep, you reach for a cup, not to drink, but to hold. The scent of the spirit, real or imagined, is comforting. It speaks of celebration and disaster, of rituals old and strange. And in that quiet place between waking and dreaming, you can almost hear Tally muttering to himself over a newly cracked cask, wondering if it will sing or scream. You smile. You'll find out in the morning. You feel the wind shift slightly, brushing past your face like a whisper from an old friend. It's the kind of breeze that tells you you're approaching something. Land, maybe, or just a memory long buried under layers of rum, sea salt, and half-sung shanties. Either way, tonight, you're thinking about the strangest side hustle pirates ever cooked up with their rum, using it like currency, not just for trade, but for favors, fines, even pirate justice. See, when you live outside the law, you still need some kind of order. And while pirate ships weren't democracies in the modern sense, they were shockingly organized. Articles were signed, rules were set, and if you broke them, say, by stealing from the communal stash, showing cowardice in battle, or passing out drunk on lookout duty, there were consequences, and rum was often how those consequences were paid. Let's say you got caught napping at the mast when you were supposed to be watching for sails. That's a fine. But instead of losing money, which, let's be honest, you probably didn't have, you'd owe rations of rum. Maybe 2 days' worth. Maybe 5. And yes, they'd keep track. Some ships even had designated rum scribes, whose sole job was to tally up fines and credits in a battered leather ledger with notes like, "Jack, 3 cups owed, due Sunday." Now, that might not seem like much, but imagine being out on the open sea for a month, and the only joy left is your nightly rum ration. Knowing you've got to go 3 days dry while your mates laugh and sip, that stings more than a lash. Historians still argue whether this rum-based justice was a formal system or just something the more creative captains invented to maintain control without violence. Some logs describe it as a sliding scale. Minor offenses cost you a few sips, while major infractions could bankrupt your rum future for a week or more. Others mention full-blown rum trials, where the accused stood before a mock court of their shipmates, defended themselves while tipsy, and faced a jury who might trade mercy for a laugh. But rum wasn't just for punishing the guilty. Oh no, it was also the most popular form of bribery. Say you wanted a better shift rotation, no more night watches in the ring. You'd sidle up to the quartermaster, flask in hand, and pour him a generous slug of your stash. Suddenly, you're back on daylight shifts and he's humming an old tune with a bit more cheer. Or maybe you want first pick of a captured officer's boots. A cup of rum to the right crewmate, and voila, those leather beauties are yours. Even if they're two sizes too small. One delightfully weird example comes from an old record on the ship Fortune's Nave, where it said a pirate named Lucky Giles once bought a second hammock hook using just 1 cup of premium spiced rum. Why? Because he didn't like sleeping level. He preferred his feet higher than his head. Said it made his dreams float better. It didn't stop at bribes and fines. Rum was also used in betting games, which pirates adored. Arm wrestling, coin flipping, rat races in the hold. One pirate ship held what they called the Bitter Barrel Games, a weekly contest where losers had to drink the bottom sludge of old barrels while the winners got the fresh top pour. You played once. You didn't win. Rum could even be gifted, and this mattered. You see, in pirate culture, giving someone a portion of your rum was an act of deep respect. It said, I trust you, I like you, or, in a few questionable cases, I may have poisoned this, and you'll find out soon enough. The emotional weight of that small cup was immense. You once gave yours to a crewmate who lost a finger. He wept, then passed out. Beautiful moment that let's not forget the dark side of all this. Because yes, pirates also used rum as payment in trade, not just with each other, but with locals in coastal settlements, black market suppliers, and sometimes even Navy deserters. One 1722 account tells of a Jamaican barkeeper who allegedly accepted rum as collateral for human cargo. It's a grim, ugly reality that historians still argue over. Were pirates morally superior outlaws, or simply opportunists with less paperwork? The answer, of course, is as murky as the bottom of a long-forgotten barrel. Now for something extra odd. There were tales of pirates using rum to pay animals. Not in the literal sense, no. But more than one logbook describes the superstitious crews pouring small offerings of rum for their ship's cat, their monkey, or even the sea birds that followed the vessel for weeks. A drop for luck, they'd say. Or, in the words of a one-eyed bosun named Reeve, keeps the bird from cursing us out loud. And what about the legendary pirate marriages? These weren't legal by any crown standard, but sometimes, when two shipmates were especially close, they'd declare themselves sea-bound partners, an arrangement blending brotherhood, romance, and mutual protection. And how did they seal it? With a shared mug of rum, passed back and forth 3 times, followed by a cheer. The details vary, and historians still debate how common these unions were. But the rum ritual? That part's in nearly every version. So tonight, as you lie there, listening to the creak of old wood and the whisper of half-remembered ballads, you think about the currency of it all. How something as simple as a warm, slightly sour sip could buy loyalty, forgiveness, sleep, laughter, even love. The world might have gone mad above deck, but below, you could still trade in kindness, 1 cup at a time. You smile at that thought as the stars drift gently across your mind's sky, each one maybe glowing faintly amber, like a shot of something smooth, sipped slowly in the dark. The deck creaks under your boots, softly, like an old friend sighing in their sleep. You glance around at the ship you've called home for weeks now, maybe months, maybe longer. You've lost track. But one thing is clear. This vessel runs on rum and resolve, and tonight, you're about to learn how pirates turned this fiery liquid into a full-blown logistics operation. Because while they may have been drunk half the time, someone still had to track the stuff. See, even pirates needed inventory systems, especially for their most sacred resource. And while you might imagine a chaotic pile of barrels rolling around in the hold, the reality was, well, only slightly more organized. Every pirate ship had what you could loosely call a rum quartermaster. a poor soul who took on the holy burden of guarding and distributing the precious cargo. This was often the same person who handled all supplies: food, gunpowder, lime, and yes, rum. But make no mistake, the rum took priority. Get the biscuits wrong and the crew grumbles. Mess up the rum rations and they throw you overboard. Possibly in a barrel, possibly without a hole. Historians still argue whether these logistics roles were elected democratically or assigned by captains and backroom deals sealed with, you guessed it, a mug of rum. But records suggest there were actual written tallies on some ships, scratched into planks, recorded on scraps of parchment, or even etched into the barrel lids themselves. You remember seeing one on the Lady's Doubloon, an infamous brig out of Nassau, carved right into the wall near the hold. 42 BRLS, our mid-month. That was all. No names, no dates, just a running tally and a warning to thieves. Now, if you were the quartermaster, you had three nightmares: spoilage, spillage, and sabotage. Spoilage was common. Rum could go bad in heat, especially if it was cut with too much water or had sat too long in poorly sealed barrels. Spillage, that happened every time the seas got rough and the hold shifted. Sabotage, well, sometimes crew got clever. One pirate was caught hollowing out the base of a barrel to create a hidden chamber, his own personal tap system. He was made to sleep in the hold for a week, so the rats could judge him appropriately. Then came the daily distribution that it wasn't just a grab-a-mug-and-go affair. Oh no, rum time was sacred. Usually around sunset, someone, often the youngest crew member, would ring a small bell, and the men would line up with mugs, flasks, and in one odd case, a hollow coconut carved to look like a skull. Each got their share, usually a quarter pint, though this could double after victories or shrink during lean days. There was a quiet ceremony to it all. Even the rowdiest crews stood still during pourings. And if you cut the line or tried to grab extra, that was an offense greater than theft. Worse than mutiny, almost. In fact, on some ships, the term rum jumper was as dirty as any curse word you could utter. One unfortunate sailor was once tied to a mast and spun 10 times while blindfolded for it. He never tried it again, mostly because he couldn't walk straight for days. But what if you ran out? That was the real problem. Pirates might have been brave and bold, but they were also desperate when dry. When rum stocks dipped, everything changed. Tempers flared. Fights broke out. Superstitions surfaced. There's one account of a captain ordering a ghost ration, having the quartermaster pour rum into empty mugs, so the act at least comforted the crew. Placebo buzz. If you will avoid that crisis, some ships had backup reserves, hidden deep behind barrels of nails or under false planks. They called it sleeping stock, not to be touched unless absolutely necessary. The idea of not touching rum, of course, was laughable to most pirates, which is why the best captains locked it in a chest and tossed the key to the ship's monkey. If you could get it back, you deserved a drink. And when they made landfall, oh, the restocking ritual was something to behold. They'd barter, beg, or raid for barrels. Sometimes they even brewed their own crude versions using molasses, seawater, and questionable fermentation techniques. A sailor on the Crimson Gull once tried this and ended up with a barrel that foamed violently in the sun. They called it sea foam surprise. No one drank it, except once, and then never again. Interestingly, pirates didn't always prefer the strongest rum. No, too strong, and you couldn't function. And pirates, for all their mischief, had jobs: hoisting sails, manning cannons, boarding ships, cooking rats creatively. So they often diluted their rum slightly, just enough to take the edge off without taking the knees out. This practice had another benefit. ration stretching. One barrel could become two if you knew the right mix. And if the taste suffered, just add lime juice or coconut milk. Boom, pirate cocktail. Add some sea salt, and you had what they cheerfully called a mermaid's bath. One more quirky tradition, the last barrel toast. Before the final barrel was tapped, the whole crew would gather. Someone, usually the oldest sailor, would make a toast. It could be poetic. It could be nonsense. One recorded toast simply said, "To the goat who bit the Spanish admiral, may we all bite back." Then, one by one, they'd take a sip in silence. It was equal parts ritual, superstition, and heartfelt goodbye to the days of plenty. And if you were lucky, you'd find a coin at the bottom, dropped in secretly by the first pourer. That meant the next ship you took would be filled with gold. If not, well, best pour again and checked out SO as you lie there now, warm under your blankets, drifting through the fog of memory and molasses. Picture that final toast. Picture the quiet clink of mugs in the glow of lantern light. The hush that falls, the sea still rising and falling beneath your back. And know that even the most fearsome pirates needed a little routine, a little reverence, and someone nerdy enough to say, "We're down to 12.5 barrels, lads. Plan accordingly." The storm hits hard, not with thunder or lightning, but with a shortage. You're mid-voyage now, somewhere off the coast of Hispaniola, and the rum barrels are getting dangerously light. That soft slosh you used to hear when you walked past the hold? Gone. Now it's more like a hollow echo, a wooden whisper reminding you that supplies are finite and tempers aren't. Welcome to the age of rum diplomacy. Yes, even pirates had to navigate negotiations, not just with enemies, but among themselves. And when the rum ran low, the crew needed more than sharp swords and loud curses. They needed strategy, maybe even a little charm. You, unfortunately, have neither, but you do have a few tricks up your salt-stained sleeve. First up, ration adjustment theater. You gather the crew, hold up a ladle, and solemnly announce that due to unexpected evaporation due to tropical moisture dynamics, daily rations will be halved. You get a few blank stares. One guy burps aggressively. But miraculously, no one mutinies. Why? Because you've prepared the ultimate distraction, a rumor. You whisper that a nearby island holds a hidden stash of Spanish rum, untouched since the last war. It's a complete lie, of course, but you sell it with a wink and a map that kind of looks real if you squint. Suddenly, the crew isn't mad, they're excited. That's pirate diplomacy, baby. Historians still argue whether pirate leaders made up maps as a form of crew morale or genuinely believed in the myths they spread. Either way, it worked. It kept people focused on something. And as any quartermaster will tell you, focus is more important than fact, but distractions only last so long. Eventually, you have to trade. Contrary to popular belief, pirates didn't spend every moment pillaging. In fact, they were surprisingly pragmatic when it came to sourcing supplies. Many pirate ships engaged in what could only be described as open-air bartering festivals at neutral ports or with friendly local settlements. And nothing, absolutely nothing, was more valuable in these exchanges than rum. Rum was currency. It was respect. It was a bribe, a gift, a treaty. You might not have gold doubloons, but if you had a few barrels of half-decent rum, you could buy your way into safe harbor, pick up intel, or convince a stubborn merchant to look the other way. Take, for example, the unwritten pirate code of Curacao, a small island that became a popular rum rendezvous. Local tavern keepers knew the score. They stocked extra barrels, watered it down slightly. Sailors were too drunk to notice, and charged double. In return, pirates brought odd trinkets, cannons, spices, or stolen silverware, which the taverns then sold to the next captain. It was a full-circle economy of theft and toasts. There's even a tale of a particularly enterprising pirate who once traded a single engraved pistol for 2 casks of aged Barbados rum. The kicker? The pistol didn't fire, but it looked valuable, and the merchant was too eager to ask questions. The pirates named the pistol Talker because it talked its way into more booze than any real currency ever could. Still, not all diplomacy happened ashore. Sometimes you had to negotiate mid-sea, flag to flag, voice to wind. You see another vessel in the distance. You raise the signal, not for battle, but for barter. A black cloth with a white mug painted on it. That was the old signal for "let's talk spirits." If the other ship replied with a red cloth bearing a cork, you knew they were in. It was like the pirate version of waving someone over for a potluck. Once alongside, the ships would lower gangplanks and meet. Captains first, then quartermasters. There'd be some tasting, some haggling, maybe an arm wrestling match or two, purely ceremonial. And eventually, barrels would exchange hands. Rum for tobacco, rum for dried beef, rum for better rum. No one ever walked away with less rum. That was bad luck. But diplomacy had its limits that if talks failed, or if someone tried to cheat, you had what was known as the empty barrel response. A symbolic gesture. This involved taking an old, bone-dry barrel and throwing it overboard toward the offending ship. It meant, you give us nothing, we give you less. The insult was clear. In some waters, it was practically a declaration of war. Still, clever captains knew how to spin disaster into advantage. If your own rum was low, you might stage a negotiation just to stall another ship, watch their crew disembark for a chat, and then send a rowboat around the back to steal from their stores. Risky? Sure. But this was a world where you risked dysentery to drink anything not distilled, so everything was relative. That a fringe tidbit? Some crews employed rum interpreters. These were sailors fluent in several languages who also knew how to describe and grade rum from different regions. They'd swish, sniff, and nod sagely. Notes of banana peel and betrayal, they might say, stroking their beard. Total nonsense, of course, but it impressed merchants. And more importantly, it made the pirates seem cultured. Now you might be thinking, but wasn't there ever a time when pirates just ran dry and gave up? Nope. When all else failed, they made rum analogs. Terrible ones. Fermented sugarcane water, fruit skins soaked in seawater, even old grog left in the sun too long and scraped off the bottom of barrels. It wasn't pretty, but it burned. And that was usually enough. So tonight, as your eyelids grow heavy and your breaths get slower, you feel the same drift your ship might feel when it finds a quiet cove after a hard negotiation. You've bartered your way through tension. You've poured smooth words like aged rum. And now, like the last splash at the bottom of the mug, your thoughts swirl into stillness. And just before you fade, remember, even pirates knew the value of diplomacy, especially when the alternative was going to bed sober. You wake to the soft creaking of wood beneath your feet and a breeze that smells faintly of citrus, salt, and something a bit sharper. Ah yes, gunpowder and sweat. But more urgently, the rum hold is nearly empty, and the last trade didn't go so well. Time to get creative. Let's talk forgery and flavoring. The final frontier of pirate budgeting. That you're not the first quartermaster to face a near-dry barrel. Pirates of the 18th century were notorious improvisers, and when real rum ran out, the fake stuff came into play. Historians still argue whether this practice was born of desperation, clever economics, or sheer boredom. Either way, you've got options, and none of them taste good. First, there's bootleg brew. a Frankensteinian mix of what little sugar, molasses, citrus, and fermented bread you can find. It's been soaking in a sun-warmed keg for 5 days. The color's right. The burn is present. The smell? Let's just say it could strip barnacles off a hull. But it'll do. And when you serve it in mugs crusted with sea salt and optimism, most of the crew barely notices. You spice it with cinnamon bark, found in a sailor's sock, throw in some orange peels, suspiciously aged, and whisper that it's a new recipe from Port Royal. Confidence is key. After all, you're not deceiving people, you're protecting morale, right? Besides, pirates were rum connoisseurs in the loosest possible sense. While officers in the Royal Navy might have sniffed at aged oak barrels and Caribbean terroir, your lads are just glad it doesn't blind them. Speaking of the Royal Navy, they had their own rationing system. Half a pint of rum per day per man, often diluted into grog, rum, water, lime, and sometimes sugar. Why lime? Because of scurvy. The pirates noticed this, of course, and tried to replicate it when supplies allowed. Which wasn't often. One fringe account tells of a pirate ship that tried using pickled cactus juice instead of lime, hoping the sourness would fool their mouths and their bodies. The result? More vomiting, but less complaining. A draw, really. Now let's talk budget. Rum wasn't just about drinking, it was a line item. As quartermaster, you've been secretly running a ledger. Not with numbers, necessarily, but with marks, tallies for barrels traded, rated, spoiled, or spilled. There's a corner of your logbook just labeled Oops. Surprisingly full. You once traded 3 barrels of rum for 6 days of port access, 2 crates of cannonballs, and a dog. The cannonballs were dented. The dog was oddly aggressive, but the port access? Invaluable, especially when it gave you time to restock. The lesson? Rum opens doors. Even if it closes your liver, still, not all ships budgeted equally. Some crews set strict limits, 1 barrel per week, no exceptions. Others, like yours, followed the flowing cup method, refill until it's gone, then panic. Guess which ones had better morale? Guess which ones lasted longer? Spoiler, not the same answer. Historians still argue whether tight rationing actually prolonged a voyage or just made the crew more likely to jump ship at the next port. After all, a pirate who's thirsty and bored is a pirate who starts looking at your captain's chair a little too long. There were even rum audits. Yes, seriously. On larger pirate ships, especially those with elected officers and shared spoils, it wasn't uncommon for the crew to demand an accounting. If too many barrels vanished without explanation, someone had to answer for it, often loudly. Sometimes with a dagger. That's where creative accounting came in. Point 1 method? Label barrels with confusing symbols. A barrel marked X3 might mean 3 rations worth, or it might be a decoy. Another trick was to hide emergency rum in the ballast, sealed tight in waterproof casks and placed beneath the floorboards. Only the quartermaster and the cook knew, and if things got dire, the cook would just discover it. Cheers all around. A more advanced technique involved rum dilution deception. You'd water down the regular barrel, but occasionally serve full-strength rum on special nights, birthdays, victories, or made-up holidays like St. Blacktooth's Eve. This made the weaker daily rations seem normal by comparison. Now, of course, you couldn't let the crew know too much. You had to maintain the illusion that the rum just appeared, like sea fog, or the captain's clean shirt. So when sailors asked where the rum came from, you said things like, "Oh, we inherited it from a Spanish ghost ship. Port gremlins snuck it aboard. A mermaid owed us a favor." And surprisingly, most of them didn't ask further, because deep down, they preferred the magic. Just like you prefer not knowing how that pickled cactus really got into the mix. But the real budgeting miracle? Making one last barrel stretch 3 more weeks, you invent a rotation system. Mugs are filled slowly, ceremoniously. A toast is required before every sip. Drinking becomes an event, not a habit. It feels intentional, sacred, even. You play music during distribution. You call it the hour of spirits. Suddenly, what once felt like rationing feels like tradition. The crew loves it that a sailor named Hobbs starts writing songs about the last barrel. Someone paints it with a smiling skull and names it Old Thirsty. Even when it's empty, no one wants to throw it overboard. They keep it on deck, fill it with rainwater, say it tastes faintly of dreams and peppered. That's pirate budgeting at its finest. Not just stretching supply, but building story, wrapping scarcity in ritual, turning rum into myth. So as the stars blink above and the sails flap gently overhead, you lean against that old barrel and listen to the quiet laughter drifting across the deck. You've kept the spirits alive, figuratively and otherwise. You've made ends meet. You've made people believe. And now, with your eyes heavy and the air warm, you drift again, on a sea of invention and storytelling. With just a hint of cinnamon bark, you wake up to the sound of sloshing. Not waves this time, barrels. Plural. Your nose twitches. Is that mango? Coconut? No. Too optimistic. It's the unmistakable scent of spoiled rum. Welcome to the part of pirate budgeting they never write songs about. Waste, rot, and the glorious art of pretending it didn't happen. See, for all their cunning at sea, pirates weren't immune to the simple reality that storing gallons of high-proof alcohol in questionable barrels under tropical heat was a recipe for disaster. Add in poor sealing, leaking hulls, sudden storms, and the occasional rat infestation, and you've got yourself a minor crisis. Or, depending on how many barrels go bad, a mutiny waiting to happen. You pry open the first lid. Mold. Thick and fuzzy like a neglected toupee. A breath escapes your lips, half sigh, half prayer. You dip a finger in. Sticky. Smells like someone tried to ferment bananas in a boot. Not quite drinkable. Not quite avoidable. Historians still argue whether pirates ever developed systematic quality checks for their booze. Some say yes, a daily rum tester, usually the youngest deckhand. Others say no. If it sloshes, you pour it. Either way, you're now that tester. You bring a sample to the captain. He raises an eyebrow, sniffs it cautiously, and mutters, "Tastes like regret." Which is pirate speak for, "We need a solution." And so begins the cleanup phase. First, the triage. You sort the barrels into 3 categories. Definitely drinkable. Drinkable with strong stomachs. Probably a weapon at this point. The second category gets assigned to the cook. Maybe he can make a stew out of it. The third is sealed up and marked with a skull and crossbones. Yes, even pirates need warning labels sometimes. But here's the strange thing. Even the bad barrels get used. You discover that the strong stench of spoiled rum works as a deterrent. Hang one near the brig, and no one wants to linger. Splash some near your personal hammock? Instant privacy. Some even believe it repels sea spirits. There's a fringe tale among Caribbean pirates about a ghost ship called the Hiccuping Widow, cursed to follow vessels that waste rum. Your crew starts calling the bad barrels widow wards. One man even ties a chunk of spoiled cork to his belt, swearing it keeps sharks away. It doesn't. Then there's the barrel economy. Empty or ruined rum barrels don't just get tossed overboard. No, they're precious in their own way. Good for makeshift stools, water catchers, drums for poorly timed sea shanties, emergency buoys, storage for non-liquid cargo like salted fish or contraband parrots. You assign a carpenter to patch the leakier ones. He mutters about rum rot, and tries to invent a new sealing technique using tar, sand, and crushed seashells. It doesn't hold liquid, but it does smell strangely festive. One creative crewmate starts using barrel staves as decorative wall art. He carves tiny ships into them, tells stories about each. Soon, you've got a gallery along the mess hall wall, the Barrel Chronicles. It boosts morale. Even the worst rum gets a legacy. Now, onto the budgeting problem. You're down to fewer barrels than planned. The original voyage budget had assumed a 3-month supply, with one celebration night per week. But with spoilage and surprise sampling, that timeline's looking optimistic. So, you do what any sensible quartermaster would: lie creatively. You start announcing imaginary delays. Storms ahead, lads. Better ration till clearer skies. Or, the stars say we'll find rum-rich shores soon. Hold tight. One time, you blame an invisible sea thief named Barreljack, who only steals from ships with loud crew. It quiets them instantly. The crew begins whispering tales of Barreljack stealing rum from other ships, too. Someone carves a little figurehead of him, part man, part barrel, with a cork leg. It becomes the ship's mascot. Strangely comforting, really. In truth, though, you tighten the pours. Mugs are filled slightly less, but more often. You add a splash of water, then tell the crew it's blessed sea nectar. Someone believes you. Someone else glares. You maintain eye contact and sip yours with a straight face. Leadership requires commitment. Night. Around the dim lantern glow, the crew begins to trade stories for sips. A funny joke might earn you an extra splash. A memory from a past raid buys a full mug. It's accidental, but you've invented the world's worst currency. Nostalgia-based rum rewards. No one's surprise. The bard of the group thrives. He sings a ballad called The Rum That Wasn't, a tragic tale of a barrel lost to time and termites. The chorus is catchy, too catchy. You hear it in your dreams. But here's the twist. This scarcity, this frugality, this slow drip of liquid gold, it actually improves morale. The less they have, the more it matters. Each sip becomes a ritual. Each toast, a treasure. Historians still argue whether this emotional economy of rum was intentional or just a happy accident of poor logistics. Either way, it worked. And then, one morning, you wake to a cry from the crow's nest. Ship, afloat, painted red. Your heart leaps. Red hull, merchant vessel, possibly Spanish, possibly rum-laden. The chase begins. The wind's at your back. The crew is suddenly full of energy, shouting, moving, loading cannons. It's the most alive they've been in weeks. Why? Because somewhere in their hopeful little pirate hearts, they believe that ship carries fresh barrels. Maybe sugar, maybe citrus, maybe a whole floating cellar of promise. They ready themselves. You ready yourself, and in that moment, you understand it. Rum is more than drink. It's motivation. It's memory. It's the reason they keep going. Even when it spoils. Even when it runs out. Even when it was never there to begin with, you smile. Adjust your coat and whisper to yourself, let's budget a little better next time. Not that you will. You feel it before you see it. Wind, sharper than before, curling the edge of your sleeves. The scent of salt is heavier now. Thick and eager, like the sea itself knows something's about to happen. The red-painted merchant ship looms larger on the horizon, swaying lazily as if taunting you. Her sails are full, but she's sluggish, probably overburdened. Could be gold, could be grain, but every soul on your ship is dreaming of barrels. You brace as your ship turns hard to starboard. Cannons rumble in their frames. A volley flies, loud, messy, more for show than aim. The red ship jerks, turns awkwardly, and then raises a white-flagged NO resistance that a ripple of cheers courses through your crew like rum before a toast. They don't wait for orders. Grapples are thrown, planks are lowered, boots hit foreign wood. You trail behind, feeling both proud and deeply suspicious. The boarding party returns quickly, faces flushed, arms loaded with supplies. And there it is, barrels, sweet, sealed, brand new barrels, each one stenciled with markings that promise molasses, rum, oranges soaked in something expensive. You tap a lid. Solid. You listen. Sloshy. You unseal. You sniffed out rich. Smoky. Tang of cane sugar and tropical air. It smells like forgiveness. The crew erupts in celebration. Not wild, just grateful. They cradle the barrels like newborns, whisper to them, promise never to waste a drop. The cook immediately claims two and starts making recovery stew. You don't ask. Historians still argue whether pirate raids were truly strategic or just glorified shopping trips with cannons. Some suggest that capturing rum was often prioritized over gold, at least once thirst hit the crew hard enough. A few fringe theories even claim pirates raided distilleries specifically, which might explain why the Caribbean map is littered with broken rum economies and suspiciously well-fed parrots as the crew settles in. You take a moment on the quarterdeck. The sun lowers itself like a sleepy candle. The air softens, and behind you, the sounds of rationing start up again, but this time for celebration. A mug for every man. Two if he tells a good story. You hear laughter. The bard is singing about Barrel Jack's redemption. Someone's carved a second leg on the figurehead. Cork again. One crewmate hands you a mug without a word. You clink it against the railing and sip. It's warm, smooth, with a slow burn that settles in your ribs. You stare at the red ship. Turns out her name was La Esperanza. Hope. Fitting. Now, for the final phase of budgeting, preservation. You hold a short meeting, a rarity. Everyone's sleepy, mildly tipsy, and still sunburned from the last repair session. But you manage to write 3 rules on a scrap of sailcloth and nail it to the rum storage. Never drink alone. Never drink without a story. If you spill it, mop it with your tongue. Rule 3 gets a few chuckles. Someone adds a 4th. If it smells like socks, don't sip. You allow it. Night falls. The stars glisten, full of gossip. The crew dozes off slowly, some on deck beside barrels like faithful pets, others swaying in hammocks with mugs resting on their chests. You stay up just a little longer. You think of the wasted barrels, the strange economies, the desperate lies, and whispered toasts. You remember the mold, the brawls, the laughter over nothing. All of it, budgeted in rum. Tomorrow, you'll adjust the stores. Recalculate rations. Decide when the next celebration should be. Maybe mark it on the map as Barrel Day. Or maybe you'll forget, because pirate accounting is a slippery beast. Things disappear. Things reappear. And in the end, all that really matters is this moment right here. A full belly. A steady ship. And just enough rum left for one last sip. You raise your mug to no one and everyone. To barrels. To budgeting. To bedtime. The waves grow softer now, their crests folding like blankets. The night air is heavy, but safe, like warm fog. And all around you, the ship quiets, sails whispering in the breeze, ropes creaking like lullabies, the last mugs clinking gently on wood. You settle into your hammock, still swaying ever so slightly, like a leaf in slow descent. The smell of old rum lingers faintly in your coat. Sweet, smoky. You let it be. The stars above blur into quiet constellations, some real, some imagined. You find one that looks like a barrel, another like a spilled mug. You decide they'll be called the Quartermaster's Regret and the Toast That Slipped. Beneath it all, the ocean hums. Slowly now, your breath matches the rhythm of the sea. Inhale with the tide, exhale with the stars. You feel the ship beneath you, no longer a vessel but a cradle, wooden, weathered, and full of strange memories. The voices fade. The story ebbs. And all that remains is the soft hush of water and the occasional thud of a sleepy parrot shifting its weight. You made it. The rum's accounted for. The crew is content. The sails are set. And for now, nothing's on fire. Let yourself drift. Let the barrel dreams come. Sleep gently now, sailor. The ledgers are closed.